Welcome to the We Big Podcast, aka the We Believe in God cast, where wisdom is the principal thing. Therefore, get wisdom, and in all thy getting, get understanding. I'm your host, Brother I, and I have with me today Brother Zariah. Brother Zariah, say what's up to the people.
Hey, how y'all doing, man? This brother Zariah. Like you said, yes, we believe in God. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, regardless of what you hear on the internet with all these other people, it's it's God.
All right, that's right, man. So yeah, we're gonna get into it today, man. Today we got an interesting one. And this is something I've been looking into, and I know you've been spending a lot of time, probably more than me. I just started looking into these things recently. But we're talking about, you guys can see from the thumbnail, we're talking about programmable money, in particular the CBDC. And I remember you brought this to my attention along with Brother Tazawar a while back. I think maybe even Brother Cadero talked about this as well, but dealing with CBDC and the impact it's going to have. And now that with these wars happen, we're gonna talk about all. We're gonna put everything together. Most High willing, we'll be able to put all of it together with these wars, CBDC, programmable money, and the dreaded mark of the beast. This comes up. Probably every 2 or 3 years, at least every 10 years for sure. This comes up, and I started understanding a while back about technology and how things work. And I look at the mark of the beast kind of like a tree that's being planted, right? So, and I've said this before, and I'm gonna say it now. Back in the 30s, when did the barcode come out?
Man, barcode been around for
I forget when it come
what
out. All
at
right, I
least
can
about
look
like
it up.
the 70s, 70s to
I'll
the
look it
the
up.
80s.
I'm not sure. No, I think it was before that. I think. Let's see. Let's see here. So the barcode started in 1952, right? And
Okay.
I was patented in 1952.
When
Uh,
did they roll it out retail?
adopted automated supermarket checkout system in the 70s.
70s.
In the
Okay.
70s. Okay, so I remember when the barcode. Also, you know what? Before the barcode, it was Social Security. When Social Security numbers came out.
Okay.
So when Social Security numbers came out, people started screaming, "It's the mark of the beast." Of course, it wasn't the mark of the beast. Then it was the
Mhm.
barcodes, right? Barcode. You can find the code 666 embedded in the barcode system, and so that was the mark of the beast. Then what was the next wave?
RFID.
Probably not. Probably internet. I wouldn't have bet when the internet first came out. They said this was going to be the mark of the beast. Then the
Well,
RFID.
you
Yeah,
know, with the internet, the www
yeah.
and
Six
like,
six six.
yeah,
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
exactly.
So the internet was the mark of the beast. Then it was the RFID chip, which I'm not through with that one yet. I haven't. I ain't.
Hey,
It's making a comeback, and it's gonna come up in this documentary that I'm putting together.
yeah,
This is making a comeback, right? The RFID is not through yet, but it kind
yeah,
of ties into what I'm saying right now, right? So what we're looking at is that all these things were not the mark of the beast. I think they're a part of the evolution that's going, or the evolution of technology that will ultimately culminate in the mark of the beast. So this is
yeah.
we're watching the progression of. So when I say it's like a tree, you plant something in the ground, you plant a apple tree in the ground, right? And it's a seed. And so you get this seed, you got this seed, you put it in the ground. Somebody say, "Hey, that's the mark of the beast." Like, it's a seed, it's not the mark of the beast, and it's not. It's a seed.
Mhm.
Then a little green sprout shoots out of the dirt. Somebody says, "Hey, that's the mark of the beast," but it's not, just a little green stem, right? So the seed
Mhm.
would be like, I don't know where it started at, right? But then you got the Social Security number. That's a little sprout, and then it grows taller. It's 5, 6 feet, and it's this wooden stem. Somebody said that's the mark of the beast, but it's just a little brown stem with green leaves on it. Nothing, and you know, it keeps going. Then it gets taller, bigger, bark, branches, creating shade, and it's all these benefits. And somebody says that's the mark of the beast, but there's nothing. And eventually, one day it'll grow apples and start dropping apples. And so, you know, what started off as a seed became an apple tree. And so what started off as simple technology or innocent technology or useful technology will ultimately become the beast system and the mark of the beast. And I think that's what we're seeing here. And so what we're going to go into and talk about is not saying that this is or this is not the mark of the beast. What we're talking about is the progress and the process of the end goal of these people, which is to create the mark of the beast and to implement the mark of the beast. That's ultimately what we're talking about, right?
I agree. I mean, I
Yeah.
think a valid part of kind of what you're saying too that people don't look at is like mark of the beast. The mark is one thing, but then the beast is another. And so looking at exactly what the beast is, essentially the beast is a system, you know. And so a lot of times when people point to certain things, hey, this barcode, hey, this internet, hey, this RFID, and you say this the mark of the beast, was what they're really doing is identifying parts of the system, you know what I'm saying, that's going to make this mark of the beast operable. And it all kind of like you said culminates as one, but there the beast is definitely it's a system altogether, and that's what we've watched over the progression of time and technology is this system start to come online, and all these different parts start to come together in order to create the type of society in which the mark of the beast will be operable.
When you talk about that, it makes me think about the beast. The beast. Why the beast, right? Normally, I guess, or generally, when it comes to prophecy, the beast refers to a system or a kingdom, right?
Hmm.
And Daniel talks about, I saw this beast, the bear. I saw the the one that had the leopard, what was the leopard feet, the face of a lion, so on and so forth. And these
The
different beasts
wings
represent
and all of
different
that, yeah.
kingdoms. But what about the beast? Is it in Sweden, Denmark, or somewhere? There's a computer system that came out, I want to say in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it's called the Beast. You remember this?
Yeah, it's like
What
a
do you
supercomputer.
what do you know about that? And what's the last time you looked into that? And have you seen any evolution of that?
I haven't really looked into it in a while, but from what I remember, it was like it's almost like a super level, almost like a quantum type computer that basically kind of like absorbed any and everything, all knowledge you knew about everything, everybody. And it was just like this central hub, And again, this was long before the advent of, well, AI, or before AI became commonplace in every day. Like we've been hearing about this beast computer going back to the mid 2000s, you
Hmm.
know. So, but yeah, I haven't really heard much about it, but I can only imagine if it was in existence back then on the type of level it would have to be now, because for all we know, AI could all be feeding back into this computer, which was known as the beast.
Right. So yeah, I'm getting different things here because some people saying it's fictional, some sources saying there's one in California, one in Belgium. The supercomputer saying something about a three-story supercomputer and started in 1972. So and that's the problem. You got a lot of misinformation out
Yeah.
there, but it's interesting. Then we got it. We get into CERN, we get into quantum physics, quantum computing, which is another interesting thing. Have you ever looked into quantum computing?
A little bit, from what I understand, it's supposed to be, it's just like hyper advanced to the point to where like there's no encryption that can't be broken. It's almost as if nothing can be kept hidden at all. Basically, it's like knowledge on another level.
Yeah, I got some theories about quantum computing that I talked to with Brother Taza Ward. I'll save that for another time. It's very interesting, right? So let's get
Mhm.
back to this technology and the track that we're on, right? So CBDC. For those who have not heard of this, you need to be aware of this because this is coming. We've been talking about this for years. When we were doing the GFN, the God Family Nation, we talked about it back then. We're talking about 2018, 19, 20. We talked about the CBDC.
Mhm.
This one it was news to me, but this is when it was first being introduced, I guess, on a public scale. and now it's here. So we're talking about central banking digital currency. Before we continue, Brother Zara, can you explain to the listeners what central banking is?
So central banking, in itself it is a structure, a mechanism of monetary control, basically. It is something that kind of it has its advent probably going back, I want to say, to the Knights Templar. It's the most modern iteration of it, but it probably predates that as well. But it essentially is where you have one institutional bank that provides the money for any particular like government or country, and all money, the creation of money, flows from this bank, but it is basically leverages debt, in order to issue this money, and the central banking system in itself basically ends up putting the government itself in debt, you know, and um some places, some countries didn't have a central bank, in the beginning, but over time, you started seeing how more and more countries just adopted the system, whether it was by choice or by force, And what I've learned over time is that even with the central banks, all central banks are not created equal. Some central banks have that option to where they don't necessarily have to go with the mainstream flow of how to do things, or you have to hold this amount of currency, or you have to do this. They have that option to kind of operate it how they want depending upon that country, but it's almost as if to say they're kind of required to have a central bank, because if you do not have a central bank to issue your money, again, which is a private bank, then what tends to happen is that country ends up going to war. Mainly with the Western world.
Okay, so I typed in here because even what you just explained is still not as
Clear?
it's simple, right? You got to talk to me like I'm real simple. So I I'm gonna try to I gotta I asked Chat GPT to explain it in layman terms.
Okay.
Let's see if this simplifies it. A central bank is basically the main bank that manages a country's money system. Think of it as the bank for banks and the financial control center of a nation. So, a simple analogy: imagine a school. You have the students, which are the regular people, teachers, which are the commercial banks, and then the principal, which is the central bank. The principal doesn't usually deal directly with students, but controls the rules the teachers follow. Okay, so what they actually do, they print and manage the nation's money. It controls how much money exists in the economy. So what's key to note here is that the central bank is not under any uh,
Governmental.
government, under any law of the country. So the central bank, the central banks that loan America money, that give our commercial banks money, that central bank does not have to answer to any authority that I'm aware of. Is that correct? Do I understand that right?
That's correct.
So who
They're,
owns
they're,
these
they're,
central
they're-
banks?
so the central bank, at least in the U.S., the Federal Reserve, is actually owned, majority shareholders by a lot of your banks that are what you would say are too big to fail. So you talk about your J.P. Morgan Chase Manhattans, talking about your Wells Fargo, your Bank of America. What is it? Is it Goldman?
Goldman
Yeah.
Sachs and Goldman?
And those they're too big to fail banks. They're actually the majority shareholders of the Federal Reserve. When it comes to this, so it's like banks owning banks, if that makes sense. Now there is what they call the BIS, the Bank of International Settlements, and it's supposed to be like the the bigger central bank. It's just like the central bank for all central banks, to which when they get to operating like on a global scale, a lot of it kind of goes back to them, and they have a lot of different weird rules and things like that. And they're one of the main ones who originally started talking and speaking about CBDCs, which again is central bank digital currencies. A lot of those rules and things came down from the BIS, Bank of International Settlements.
Apex of this system is the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, the central bank of central banks. The Bank of International Settlements has created a CBDC program in practically every country of the world through its Innovation Hub, the tech incubator set up for this purpose. The vision these autocrats have for us is to make our money programmable.
The really big dangers of CBDCs are the programmability, which is essentially it's not even money. It's like your money becomes potential money.
The whole thing about programmable money is they decide when you will have access to it and how you will be able to spend it even. Let's say you're grocery shopping, and since you're expecting guests on the weekend, you buy 4 or 5 bottles of wine, right? On the way home, you decide to fill up your car with gas. You stop at the gas station, but you're not going to be able to pump the gas. Well, you just bought alcohol, right? Look to China. That is going to be our future. And it's not going to be a future in like 30, 40, 50 years from now. It is happening now.
So, so I'm asking it to explain the Federal Reserve because I'm looking at this Federal Reserve, which was established in 1913, and that's
Do you
interesting
know
as
how?
well, huh?
Do you know how?
I don't remember. I do. I know we went over this before, but I can't remember the details. Please explain.
When they passed the law for the Federal Reserve, it happened like over like a Christmas holiday, like on a weekend while everybody was gone. It was a very much like a just a cloak and dagger, in the secrecy of the night thing, you know. And it's just one point it was no central bank, and then the next thing it was, you know. But on the holiday when everybody was distracted at home, eating, thinking about relaxing, doing other things, that's when they implemented the Federal Reserve.
Right. So people basically the banking system changed overnight,
Yep.
and so now you have
Unaware.
this central banking system, which to my knowledge goes back to the Rothschilds.
When you talking banking system, yeah,
Yeah.
essentially. Yeah.
And so now, now that you have the central bank, so the central banks are critical to the financial structure of it in most major countries,
Well,
correct?
pretty much because you that's through the means, the avenue to which all transactions are done, you know.
Okay. So then we get to the digital currency. So let's break down digital currency for those who don't know.
Well, the first popular and I guess you would say most prominent digital currency was Bitcoin. You know, Bitcoin runs on something called the blockchain. All right, blockchain is basically, layman's terms, like you would have a accountant and he would have books where he keeps track of, a this person A owes person B this much money, you know, or person A sent this person $50, you know, or person B has now $100, you know, but they just sent $75 to here. So just like a ledger would keep track of all transactions, who has what, and how much is in the amount, that's basically what the blockchain is, except in digital form. And it exists online, and it is governed by different computers and held on what they call nodes all around the world. Anyone can spin up a computer and download the blockchain for Bitcoin, so to speak. And it keeps track of the Bitcoin and everything. And so that essentially is where it started at. But by releasing Bitcoin to the general public and making it open source, they knew eventually that people would take that and build other iterations and other digital currencies that ran on Bitcoin and other blockchains. And those other blockchains is what gave way to digital currencies, or what people would call cryptocurrency, you know. And so again, that's the blockchain. For the most part, when it comes to Bitcoin and a lot of these other tokens, they are decentralized. All right. Decentralized meaning no one person has full authority over the blockchain itself. It can't be manipulated. You know, you can't steal from someone and say, hey, I had this much money It's all tracked and it can't be manipulated because it's open source and it's decentralized. There's no one central power that can shut it down. It can't happen. But alongside the development of Bitcoin and other decentralized blockchains, they created centralized blockchains where there is a central authority. So it just depends on what kind of cryptocurrency or token that you're going to be using. So typically, when it comes to central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, they're going to run on something that's more centralized to where they can have executive or administrative functions, meaning they can freeze the account. They can block the account from being able to.
Okay, hold on, because
All
you getting a little headed because I definitely want to go there, right?
right.
So we talk about you mentioned open source. You said that they made it open source. So what exactly, just so everybody can follow and I can follow, when you say open source, you said they made blockchains or they made
Bitcoin.
Bitcoin open source. What does that mean, open source?
So when something is open source, meaning that the code is available for anybody to read and see, you can see exactly what's in it. And I can take that code and I can say, hey, you know what? I like this. I'm gonna use this as a template, but I'm gonna add to it and create my own based on this. And it's free to use for anybody who wants to grab it and grab hold of that code and do something with. That is open source versus something like okay, an example. We talk about phones. You got Android.
Hmm.
Android is a code. It is open source. Anybody can download Android and do whatever they want, build on Android, use it how they want to. All right. Whereas if you got an iPhone, it's by Apple, iOS. It is not open source. It's closed source. You're not just going to take that and build on it and create what you want, not without Apple's permission. You see what I'm saying? So that's the difference when you're talking code and programming language. And open source means anybody can open it up, see it, see what's in it, and build onto it. Versus closed source meaning it's secret, it's kept private, and there's nothing you can do about it. You can use it, but you can't build on it, add it, or take it and run with it.
All right, so now with that being said, before we get into the whole CBDC in detail, I want to kind of go deal with this Bitcoin because looking at you judge a tree by the fruit that it bears, and looking back, and you may be more knowledgeable in this area than me, so you can correct me if you think I'm off. But this, I got a theory about Bitcoin, right? What I recently found out was what's this guy's name, man? Billionaire dude, older cat, the glasses real blunt when he speaks, but he came out and said way back when, I don't know about Bitcoin. He said when you find out who the creator of Bitcoin is, it's gonna go bankrupt overnight. It's gonna lose all
Why
its
no
value overnight.
bitcoins and why no cryptocurrency?
Well, Bitcoins, I called the top of the market in December 2017 when it was $19,600. I said, if you have Bitcoin, sell half, keep half. This is the top. Nobody listened to me. If you knew who was really behind Bitcoin, you would run as fast as you could to sell it. I know. 100%. If you knew who owned Bitcoin or who started Bitcoin, and you had Bitcoin, you couldn't sleep at night. I know. 100%. And when the real founder of Bitcoin comes out, it is my humble opinion, and there's nothing humble about me, Bitcoin will go to zero.
One day.
In a microsecond, whoop, like that.
Recently, there's a lot of rumors that Jeffrey Epstein was behind Bitcoin. He didn't create it, but he funded it. Right? I don't know if you've seen that. You seen that?
Yeah, I did.
Do you think that's true, or you think there's any validity to that claim?
No, absolutely not. No,
None.
no.
Interesting.
He wasn't a
However, it's
coder. He did that. What he did try to go in and fund certain people who were in the inner circles dealing with Bitcoin toward the beginning. You
mhm.
know, but I don't think what he did or any of his influence had any real bearing on the direction that Bitcoin went.
All right, but they put that out there, right? They put that out there,
for a
and it
reason.
definitely had an
Absolutely.
impact on Bitcoin. Bitcoin plummeted, but it's worth
Yeah.
so much. Even with that dive, it's still very valuable. However, so my theory is this: is that Bitcoin was put out there and paraded as this decentralized thing to where it's kind of a way to operate out of the system because
Hmm.
so many people didn't trust government, and it served multiple functions. It seems, and I could be wrong, but from what I can see, it was one of the things they used for trafficking. It was a way for them to do a lot of illegal transactions without being traced in the banking system. So they could use that in the black market to do all whatever. Anybody could use it for whatever, right? And people really couldn't trace. So I think clearly they were using it for the trafficking and all this stuff they were doing in the Epstein files was one thing. But it had an appeal to the masses because it's a way to kind of get from under the thumb of the government, especially in the 90s, 2000s, where the government was being exposed for so much corruption, and more people were not trusting the government. So this was appealing. But I also think it was a Trojan horse because it got people comfortable with the idea of digital currency. It introduced digital currency to the masses, which is the point. Because if the government had come out with it, I think it would have gotten a lot more resistance. But this way, a lot of people started going to it. And then you said it was open source, so now you got Bitcoin, you got Ethereum, you got I don't know all these other coins that people started making, and it just really started introducing digital currency to the masses, and people started playing with it. People started accepting it. It became normal, and then you couple that with the COVID thing and going cashless and it create more and more credit card, less and less cash. And so it's acclimating the masses to dealing with money in a digital sense, not dealing with physical money. And I think that was ultimately the purpose of Bitcoin was to do exactly what it did. When you look back and see what happened, I think that was ultimately the whole goal, and I think that goal has been accomplished. What do you think about that?
I agree with some of it. Some of it I don't. You know, I think it was definitely used in a way to where to start to introduce people and get them used to the idea of digital currencies. I do agree with that, but the idea of them not spending cash, people kind of been moving away from cash for a long time anyway. Even if they were just using the debit cards, you know what I'm saying? A lot of people, at least in the Western world, was used to not spending cash already. So that really wasn't too big of a jump. You know what I'm saying? And then again, you look at a lot of people who were dealing with Bitcoin and things like that. It's really more of the younger generation. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, you got a lot of people, millennials and even older, but it's more of a younger generation thing. A lot of the older generation, especially baby boomers or Gen X, a lot of them, man, they're fine with their debit cards and credit cards, and they're not really interested in nothing else. And granted, it could be said that, well, if you are a long term mastermind, the younger generation is who you want to capture anyway. You know,
Absolutely.
but I do believe that I don't think that was the main goal of Bitcoin. Like you said, they use a lot of it for like trafficking and black market purposes. Nothing has been used more for the black market than cash. Even with the existence of Bitcoin, why would I use Bitcoin and it's going to log a transaction on a ledger somewhere, even digitally, when I could just do cash?
Okay, maybe I understood it wrong. So let me just to be clear,
Okay.
what was the appeal of Bitcoin?
The appeal of Bitcoin was having currency that wasn't dependent upon a central banking system, something completely co-opt outside of the central banking system. That was the initial appeal of it for a lot of people, saying
Right.
they look kind of like they would call it digital gold. You can hold gold, I can hold gold, and central banks can hold gold, businesses can hold gold, and we can transact with each other in gold and for exchange of goods and services if we so choose. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And we can do that whether there's a central bank or not. Same thing with Bitcoin. Whether there's a central bank or not. You got Bitcoin, I got a Bitcoin wallet. We want to do business. We can transact. We don't have to be a
We have to
part of
go
the
through the
banking
banking
system.
system.
Yeah, that was the initial appeal of
So,
Bitcoin.
so okay,
You
so
don't need the
essentially, it
banks.
stripped control of the banks. Like right now, it's
Mm-hmm.
hard to do any kind of transactions, any kind of business without dealing with a bank. It's not
Yes.
impossible, but it's much more difficult, especially with cash being less involved in daily society. But with the Bitcoin, that kind of gave you the power to do transactions digitally, but without having to deal with banks.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of
And,
put your
and,
money
and, and
back in your hand. So
yes.
I don't have to do cash, hand to hand cash, but we can still do so. I can still send you bread real quick over the phone, over the computer, but I don't have to go through the bank and do all this stuff. So they ain't got to be all of my business and tracking everything I do.
Exactly. And in whatever amount you want, from the
Yeah.
smallest to the largest, anywhere in the world.
Yeah, no, they not taxing you for transferring funds and all that. Like if I want to
Mm-hmm. All
send
the
money
middlemen.
from to an international account, it's like $40.
Yeah, you got all the clearing houses that it has to go through.
Yeah,
That's not the
and with the
same when you doing
Bitcoin,
stuff.
I didn't have to. It didn't cost me all that to send my money. I can send my money. It was instantaneous.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now, so going back to my theory, right? So the idea that you could do these transactions quickly, efficiently, without a third party being involved. That was the appeal, right? You don't have to deal with the banking system. So
Mm-hmm.
now it's like the old bait and switch. So now that more people, and you talked about the younger generation, I think 100% that's the goal. Satan is always going after the next generation. He's thinking
Yeah.
3 or 4 generations ahead. Okay, that's just how I understand it. It makes me think about in Exodus, right? He said he will
Punish.
curse to the third and fourth generation of them that hate
Mm-hmm.
me. So that's showing that Satan is already thinking 3 or 4 generations ahead. He's trying to get you to sin so he can bring sin, bring curses and
In your
these
family
things three
line.
or four generations down your through
Mm-hmm.
your bloodline. Okay, so now so we know he's targeting the next generation. He's not targeting us. He's targeting our children and our children's children and our children's children's children, so on and so forth. So by the time they come into play, digital currency is a normal thing. And it's borderline normal now because when you talk about dealing with credit cards and everything, most of our money today, most of it is digits on the screen. Most of
Mm-hmm.
your money is just numbers on the screen, and you can still go to the ATM and get cash, but then a lot of places don't even take cash. They only deal
Yeah.
it pretty much in digital currency. Because a credit
Exactly.
card, you have a plastic card that represents digital currency, or that's used as digital currency that represents a,
Mm-hmm.
a, a physical and fiat currency, right? So
Absolutely.
most people are already kind of acclimated to dealing in digital currency, and as the generations go on, that's going to be normal. Because you look at the 20-year-olds today, how many of them actually deal in cash, or how often, or what percentage? I'm willing to bet it's way less percent than what my generation deals with.
Man, look, I had kids come to me all the time of that same generation. Somebody gives them like cash or something for or whatever. They come there like, hey, let me give you this $20 so you can send it to me on Cash App. They don't want
Mm.
cash.
They-
They
okay,
don't want
so
that.
case in point,
Hey,
right?
send it to me on Apple Pay. They don't want cash.
Yeah, they rather use their phone to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So most people are pretty much acclimated. And I think that was the goal. I think that was the goal to introduce it to the masses, to the public, and get it to where it is now. So here's the bait and switch. So now the whole appeal, the whole initial thing was we don't have to deal with the banking system. So now got everybody on digital currency. Then we introduced because you kind of explained they paralleled it with central banking. Central banking got in the game too, but it wasn't forced and pushed on the people, and it rarely is initially. So
Mm-hmm.
then now that you have the central banking digital currency. So now central bank is getting back in the game. So they took over the physical and the fiat currency. Now they're getting into the digital currency. So now when central banking gets involved, we go right back under the the banking
Mm-hmm.
system that we're under now, but just in a digital form.
Yeah.
However, it's to the 10th power because when you get into digital banking, then everything is controlled with the push of a button,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so now they're going to be able to come in and control exactly how much money you get, how you're able to spend your money, what you can do with your money, when, all these things. That's when we get into the programmable money. And this might sound futuristic. This might sound, I don't know, cuckoo to some people. This might sound way outside the box, but I'm not lying to you. This stuff is in the works. This stuff is happening. And they're and they've been talking about this publicly. And you know, if they're talking about it publicly, it's already done. It's nothing you can do about it. They're not going to spill the beans before people have a chance to do something about it. Or after, you know, they're not going to spill the beans and give people an opportunity to stop it from happening. If they're talking about it publicly, it's already happening. And I'm going to go into it. I have documents and I have proof that, I mean, they've already done it in Nigeria. I showed you that earlier. They did a rollout in Nigeria, and they used Nigeria as a testing ground, and it didn't go well. It went terrible, and they still called it a success because they went from 0.05% of the population using digital currency to 6% of the population using digital currency, and they considered that a success.
Just as biometric IDs were piloted in India, so CBDCs were piloted in Nigeria, a country of almost 230 million people. Nigeria was chosen as the testbed for the launching of CBDCs, as one of the most informal cash economies of the world. If they could make CBDCs work there, they could make them work anywhere, so they thought.
In Nigeria, one of the first countries to get off the ground with its CBDC for a population of over 200 million people, it didn't go well.
So the way the CBDC in Nigeria was set up is that in order to access the CBDC, you have to have a national identification number, which is the Nigerian Digital ID project.
And there are many pilots. Now we have Nigeria stepping there, the largest universe of a pilot.
What they did in Nigeria was they made them the test case for the CBDCs.
After a 3-week delay, Nigeria's digital currency is now legal tender. At its launch, President Muhammadu Buhari says the e-Naira will usher in opportunities for banks, customers, and the country's economy.
At least 60% of the economy was underground.
Out of the gate, about 0.5% of the population was using the CBDC known as the e-Naira. Now, the central bank wanted to spur adoption. That was not a good rate for them to have after they invested all this money. So they announced that there would be no longer requirements for bank accounts to have an e-Naira. That didn't work. A month later, they announced that they would have discounts on the e-Naira. That didn't work either. And that's when the Central Bank of Nigeria took a different path. Suddenly, it announced that it would start restricting cash. Then, as if that wasn't bad enough, it announced that it was going to pull all of the cash off the streets.
Such a task would normally take several years to phase in. Instead, the Nigerian government invalidated all the cash in the country and attempted to roll out the CBDC within 2 months. All cash was canceled, everyone lost their savings, no one had money to buy food, CBDCs were issued, and riots broke out.
There are claims that some persons were killed.
The way things are is not fair. We all are citizens. We only came to at least plead with the bank. Police came out of the central bank, started shooting, attacking us. They even killed people. About 3 persons died today. Nobody wanted to destroy anything.
Months later, despite riots in the streets, despite protests outside of banks, despite people going hungry because they didn't have access to cash that they were dependent on, Central Bank Governor Godwin Emefiele said this was a success. The adoption rate of the CBDC rose from 0.5% to 6% of the population, celebrated it as a success, as being the currency of choice, in his words. It was not the currency of choice by any means. It was a currency of force.
People have very much resisted in Nigeria the CBDC. They've tried not to use it. The Nigerian government is relatively open that it's completely surveillable and not anonymous. It was designed to surveil. So despite the fact that they created these conditions to coerce people into using the CBDC, the populace resists.
Transforming the underlying economics of financial services through digital currency will help those who live in poverty directly.
These people that ostensibly suffer from this identity gap, that suffer from financial exclusion, don't want the financial inclusion that they're being offered by the CBDC.
You know, they also piloted in China.
China used the social credit score.
Yeah, well, not just that. No, not just that. The actual CBDC, the digital currency. And they use one of those admin functions that is going to be pretty popular, which was they issued stimulus. This is around maybe a couple years ago. They issued stimulus to all the people, all the citizens in China, but it came with a time limit. You had to use it by a designated time. I want to say maybe like 2-3 weeks or so. If you didn't, it expired, and that's all it was, you know. And see, that's an option that's pretty attractive for somebody like a central bank, because again, a central bank deals with the flow of money, the velocity of money, you know. And so for them, they want to keep money moving. The more the money is moving, the more successful an economy appears to be, you know. So you can prop up an economy and it cannot really be doing good at all, but the velocity of money is moving and it's quick. So hey, you can give off the appearance of, you see what I'm saying? And so having a time limit set on the money means that you can keep that going, you know, for however you want, you know. And again, that makes it harder for people if you want to save money. You know, how can you save if you got to use it by a certain amount of time?
So they put an expiration date on the money.
Yep.
So now going back to China, they issued out this stimulus and they gave them, you know, just say 3 weeks, 21 days to capitalize on this, but it had to be in digital currency. They had to switch over to digital currency. How did they tie in the digital currency to that?
Well, it was the digital currency. They issued the digital currency to their digital wallets, you know, and they could use it wherever it was accepted at, which was like retail or whatever, you know.
But they had to use it within a certain amount of time. So now it's basically kind of throwing people in the deep end of using digital currency. Here go all this money, but it's only digital, and you only got 21 days to use it. So everybody rushes out, get this digital. If you don't have a digital wallet, you're gonna get one. If you haven't used digital currency, you're gonna use it because it's free money. It's just not physical.
You're going to stimulate the growth in the economy.
Yeah.
Yep.
So let's talk about the full capabilities. We kind of start touching on it, right? So now they have the capabilities with digital currency to put an expiration date on the money. What else can they do with the money?
Geographical regional blocks, meaning they could say, well, you know, hey, based on your social credit score, we think you should only be allowed to shop within this particular zip code here, or these, or within this city, you know, or on these particular websites, you know. Therefore, if you go outside of your authorized zone, the money don't work. You go to scan, you got it in there, but it's not authorized to spend here, you know. And it's not something that's too far or shouldn't be too far to believe, because we already see that in the form of SNAP benefits and food stamps. You know, hey, you can only use it at certain authorized retailers, and you can only use it for certain types of food. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So they already have that technology available even in the debit cards. So it's not hard, not that much of a stretch to think that it's going to be the exact same way with the CBDCs.
Well, and let me give you another real life example. If you remember, it's interesting how quickly we forget. I always say how quickly we forget because things happen and people move on so fast. But do you remember the strike the truck drivers went on in Canada? It was a couple years ago. They went on strike in Canada, right? What was the strike about?
The trucker strike, it
had something to do with COVID or something
They were protesting something. Yeah,
they couldn't cross the border or something. It was something. They had these restrictions. It was ridiculous. So they said, "No, we're not going to do nothing." So they went on strike and they started marching and protesting and blocking the roads and whatnot. And so they got, I don't know how many of them on camera, you know, because they were out publicly protesting everything. And so they started identifying these people just on video, because the video technology is way beyond what they tell the public. Like what they do in China, they do in America and everywhere else, they can do it. They just don't talk about it publicly, right? But they're able to just get on video and identify people real fast. They did the same thing with when they stormed the Capitol. They identified a lot of people like that. So anyway, in Canada, these people start protesting, these truck drivers, and then their accounts start getting locked. They start closing their accounts. Yeah. And they just shut down all their accounts. Boom, 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 just because they were publicly protesting. So then the people saw that, and this was public news. So people started doing GoFundMe pages to support these people so they can continue to protest against the tyranny and still feed their families. And then GoFundMe was shut down by the government. Somebody said, nope, shut down the GoFundMe. And we thought GoFundMe was a private entity.
Open, yeah.
And the government or some authority shut them down. And then there was an alternative to GoFundMe. I forget what it was called. And so people went to that one and started raising funds for these drivers there, and they shut them down as well.
A central bank digital currency, I believe, is a threat to liberty in this country because it creates a mechanism for the government to be able to wipe out your bank account or wipe out your dollars if you say or do something that the government disapproves of, as you see in places like China, as you see even happen to the Canadian truckers, the Freedom Envoy, losing access to their financial bank accounts.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoking emergency powers against the truckers who are protesting vaccine mandates.
That wasn't what shocked the world. What woke Canadians up was when they went after bank accounts.
By the time we were into week 4, the government declared a state of emergency and invoked what's called the Emergency Measures Act in Canada.
The federal government has invoked the Emergencies Act.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act for the first time in history.
The police will be given more tools to restore order in places where public assemblies can constitute illegal and dangerous activities.
And the Emergency Act gave police authorities and all government officials more power to act on that situation. And one of those first harsh measures was the freezing of a number of bank accounts.
Financial institutions will be authorized or directed to help address the situation by regulating and prohibiting the use of property to fund or support illegal blockades.
The government decided as one of the measures to freeze bank accounts of some of the truckers, some of the attendees, and some of the people that had donated money to this protest. When I say accounts frozen, that means your personal account, your joint accounts with your spouse, your family accounts, they were shut down, and people were completely locked out of being able to fund any of their operations.
The vast majority of people had their bank accounts, including me, frozen. We were never charged. There was never a warrant for our arrest. We've never been convicted of anything.
It was, in effect, an extrajudicial process. Does the government and law enforcement agencies have authority to randomly contact banks and shut down your account without judicial process? And my answer, and the answer of many Canadians, is no. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Bill of Rights says no.
They've deputized the banks to take action against you, to make it almost impossible for you to be a productive member of society, because if you don't have a bank in Canada, how do you get a mortgage, a car payment, go grocery shopping? And we're seeing this move towards everything being digital. If you don't have access to a bank card, how are you supposed to participate in Canadian society?
We're lucky that at this point, we still have cash that we can rely on. But if it wasn't for that cash, you have no recourse.
My son has a very complicated medical history, and my credit card was on file with his drugstore to get his heart medication, and we couldn't get his heart medication because my accounts were frozen. You're not allowed to protest in this country, and if you do, they're just going to go after your financial assets without any form of due process.
Following the freezing of the bank accounts, the government moved in to shut down this protest, and it did. It came in heavy-handed and used a substantial amount of force to beat and arrest a number of peaceful protesters into submission to clear the area.
So they have, with the central banking system, they have control of the money. We just didn't see to what extent until now. Now, when it goes digital, they have 100% control, total control. There's no workarounds if there's no physical currency. There's no workarounds, so they have 100% control. You talk about programmable money. We talked about years ago, we talked about these 15-minute cities. This stuff is in writing. They've been talking about, they planned this stuff out years ago. It doesn't always go according to plan as far as the timeline is concerned, but they have these things already mapped out. And so what you were talking about, what was the phrase you used, Zariah, when referring to the 15-minute cities, or you said geopolitical?
I said geographic regions. Zone.
Geographic regions, aka 15-minute cities, meaning that they're going to basically have people sectioned off into cities, and everything you need was in 15 minutes of walking. And kind of like that movie Out of Time, I think it was.
In Time.
Yeah, where they had the section of the cities blocked off based on your financial status. I don't know to what extent, but this just kind of give an idea. They're going to have people relegated to certain areas, and and they'll control how you can spend your money. So, for example, in the documentary you'll see, but you go to a liquor store, grab you a bottle of liquor, say you're gonna celebrate tomorrow. The weekend's coming up. You go get your bottle of liquor on Thursday night for the weekend, for whatever, or you go get you some wine, whatever you want, and then you go get gas. You go to the gas station. You got to use your digital, however they're gonna have it, and we're gonna get into that in a minute. But you use your digital currency, however it's set up, and it says access denied. You bought liquor. You bought alcohol. You can no longer operate your vehicle.
Yeah.
What can you do? You have no recourse. There's nothing you can do. And then
I mean, we are talking about dystopian digital prisons that will be created through central bank digital currencies, because the programmability, and this has been mentioned in the studies by central banks, include, of course, geography. And there's this proposal for climate change, whatever reasons, that people should stay within their 15-minute walking small local area and be restricted.
The Oxfordshire Council will place electronic gates on key roads in and out of the city, confining residents to their own neighbourhoods.
What if we could create a new normal where we reclaim our time, our health and well-being, and our communities?
This is the idea behind the 15-minute city. A 15-minute city is one where everything we need is close to home, where communities are safe and inclusive.
The 15-minute ghettos, it's not about saving the planet. It's not about adding quality to your life and making life easier for you. No, it's to lock you down. That's the whole purpose of it.
The use of questionable arguments, squarely focused on controlling people rather than benefiting the environment, should give everyone pause.
That was a health emergency, so we needed the vaccine passports. Now we have a climate emergency, and we need a system to control human behavior in Canada.
These are mechanisms of control that, once they take hold of you, the ability to revolt or have a revolution will be gone. And it seems like that may be the intention. Don't allow the people to rise up against overreach and over control and authoritative states by implementing a system that can shut people down immediately.
So I think one of the reasons they want this new system that ultimately amounts to a control system is because they see it as the ultimate form of risk management. They essentially want to move to a system that's not unlike the feudal system that existed in medieval Europe, where you have, a privileged, untouchable upper class and a low class of serfs. But if you implement a system this way with the technology they're using, you don't have to worry about peasant rebellions. You can manage the risk of the underclass. So you surveil them constantly, you can turn their money on and off, you can turn their access to services and really anything else on and off as well.
What happens when your government goes rogue? What happens when your government becomes tyrannical? What happens when your government makes tyrannical demands against the population? What recourse do you have? The word slavery comes to mind. And I see it as being irreversible. I see that once we go to a digitized currency that is controllable by a central platform, that you will no longer have the freedoms to make those choices that we do now. That freedom will be gone.
To them, CBDCs is like the pinnacle of what they could achieve, and they're so close to it. But we have to stop it.
Now, I'm just thinking about this too with these cars. They got the cars now to where all the cars that are being manufactured, they have these kill switches or whatever it's called that the police, aka the government, has access to. So they can stop your car anytime they want to.
Yep, mandatory included in it. Yep, all the cars.
Mr. Chair, I rise in support of our amendment. This is co-sponsored by Mr. Perry from Pennsylvania and Mr. Roy from Texas. And I regret that we have to offer this amendment. What I'm going to describe will probably sound like a bad science fiction movie, but that's what's written into law. Right now in law, that's going to be implemented it says for 2026 and beyond. Now, the reality is the technology doesn't exist, but that doesn't keep legislators from imagining things that they would like to do to infringe on civil liberties. But there is a law that states that every vehicle manufactured is going to have a kill switch in it. The car itself will monitor your driving. And if the car thinks that you're not doing a good job driving, it will disable itself. So the car dashboard becomes your judge, your jury, and your executioner. Imagine this. We got a snowstorm coming. A mom takes her kids out. They're going to the grocery store. It's snowing. They're trying to get some groceries before the big storm hits. She swerves for a pothole. The neighbor's pet gets in the way, swerves for that. A first responder goes by. She pulls over. Her car says, "You got one more swerve, and then we're going to ground you." There it is. The next thing she has to avoid, an icy patch in the road. The car has adjudicated her as unsuitable for driving. It disables the vehicle, and there she's stranded. My question is, how do you appeal your sentence once your car, the technology in your car, has judged you to be incapable of driving? Once it's disabled you and your children at the side of the road, how do you appeal that? Do you press a button on the dashboard? Do you start talking to an AI? What if it really was somebody who was drunk? Are you really going to send a police car after this? Disabled vehicle? Do we have the resources to do that? There's going to be so many false positives. The technology is unworkable. That's why the DOT is still in the rulemaking process, asking for feedback on how this thing could even exist. And it's just a bad idea, but it's in law, and so our amendment would defund that. And with that, I'd like to reserve the balance of my time.
So this stuff is happening, and I don't think people realize what's really going on, man. I don't think people really see it for what's happening, but this is really happening. They're building a prison around you, and you don't even see it.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, it's many reasons why people are reacting, or I should say not reacting in a way that you think that they should or would act. But I think in general, people have been so programmed, and people are so caught up in the everyday mundane routine of doing things, and oh, I just gotta pay my bills, or hey, it's as long as it's not affecting me immediately right now, I'll worry about it later. You know, it's that type of culture and society, especially in the Western world, especially, you know, to the point to where they'll literally change your life right before your eyes, and you just go along with it like it's normal up until that actual day where something happens and it's like, oh wait, what's going on? No, this ain't right. This is not fair. But it's been happening right before you this whole entire time, you know, because the way I look at it, what they have released in regard to like the Epstein files, I'm pretty sure it's way more, but what they have released, it is basically a full admission of everything that was touted as a conspiracy theory for decades. You know, they just come out clean that, yeah, oh well, yeah, this is what's going on. Millionaire, billionaires kidnap kids and they take them and they rape them and do whatever they want to
Well,
do
who's
to
gonna do
them.
something about it? Who's gonna do something about it? Nobody. Who's going like who?
And
Prince
people are
Andrew,
going
whoever
on
was
like
one of
it's
the
no big
people in
deal.
Britain got arrested or something, and everybody's like, oh yeah, and then he's free now. Nothing happened. Everybody talking about Epstein. Who were the people that was buying these children? He was the facilitator.
Exactly. He can't facilitate where there's not a market for.
Right.
See what
So
I'm saying?
there's really nothing really came out of this other than people just looking at it and finding stuff, but it's not stopping nothing. It's not
No,
slowing
it's
anything
not.
down. They're still doing their thing. And so I want to talk about this aspect of it too, because we're talking about it for what it is, right? Understanding the true purpose of these things. However, I think part of the acceptance is how it's going to be presented and how it is being presented. So we talk about the pros and cons. So of course they're going to present everything with the pros. They're going to present the convenience of these things, of CBDC, how convenient it is going to be. And then the convenience doesn't stop. It's going to become more and more convenient. And this is how they're going to get people to accept it initially. Like you talk about, prime example, you say, well, these youngsters come to you and they give you 20 so you can and let you cash app it to them because it's more convenient to have just not have to worry about cash, open up your wallet, you just hit your phone. And then what's more convenient than that? Can the convenience improve? Absolutely. And they plan on it too. They plan on giving you the ultimate convenience. And I don't want to jump ahead here, but that's exactly what's going to happen. So understanding that this CBDC is here. I'm not going to say coming. It's here. It just hasn't been completely pushed out to the people.
The COVID operation, many of the policies had no proper medical justification or purpose. Whereas if you have to have policies that partly was used to even sort of lay the groundwork for CBDCs, there's plenty of evidence. I mean, why did the Bank of England come out around the time when the first lockdown was announced with its first sort of public consultation about introducing CBDCs and all the benefits and needs of CBDCs?
Today, governments force all banks to follow a strict regulatory regime known as AML and KYC regulations. This stands for Anti-Money Laundering and Know Your Customer regulations.
They started it with the COVID scam. Oh, you can get sick by handling cash. And they talked into a lot of stores that we no longer accept cash. This was the agenda.
The collapse in the use of cash, thanks to the COVID crisis.
Money changes hands all the time, but can it carry the coronavirus?
In order to avoid the risk of transmission through physical handling of money, we encourage the use of cashless transactions.
A lot of people aren't using cash. The vast amount of transactions are electronic today.
For CBDCs to properly do their job, you need to get rid of the competition. You need to get rid of cash. That actually is a declared goal of CBDCs.
If we lose cash, our money is getting locked into the banking system. We can no longer withdraw our deposits from the banks. And for instance, central banks could impose negative interest rates and thereby wipe out our savings.
The COVID model is the problem. The government could not come out and restrict free speech, so they had Facebook and everybody else do it. What you really have to understand is you have no right to free speech. It's not a constitutional right. It's a restraint upon government. The Fed would have to get a search warrant to go through your accounts. If the bank basically issues the digital dollar, bank doesn't need a search warrant.
Americans do not have financial privacy. They have deputized banks as these sort of law enforcement investigators and force them to observe and report on the government's behalf because of laws like the Bank Secrecy Act, the Patriot Act.
Since the 1960s, these regulations have gotten stronger and stronger. Banks are required to monitor and surveil everything we do and report all suspicious activities to the government. Even if CBDCs are not achieved in some countries, an escalation of AML and KYC policies can produce a system just as oppressive as CBDCs. These AML and KYC regulations need to be reduced or eliminated to restore our civil rights.
This can quickly expand. And that's what the history of financial surveillance and control has been, one of steady expansion. And the more that expands, the more people are going to want to avoid that system. They need to stop this practice, surveilling all financial transactions.
With CBDC, and you mentioned earlier about how they're using what's SNAP benefits. All right, the term, it's interesting how the term keeps changing. When I was young, it was food stamps. Then we started calling then you had, it kind of split to WIC, and then you had WIC and food stamps, and then the food stamps went from this little, monopoly looking money to a card, which we called the EBT. It was in Texas, it was called something else in Texas before it was EBT. I forget what it was. Something, it was briefly, then it became EBT, and now it's called SNAP benefits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I don't even know where that came. It just,
they used to call them. They called them books because it was like coupons, like in the
yeah.
book, that you
Oh
tore
yeah,
out.
yeah. Hey, listen, boy, let me tell you something. I ain't had no problem spending no food stamps. I know people used to be embarrassed by it. Not me. If I can go in there and buy what I want to buy with it, yeah, it's all good. So, and now with the SNAP benefits, they're. I know with WIC it was always like that. WIC, you can only buy certain things with WIC, with the WIC card. Then now with the food stamps or SNAP benefits, that's officially, or did they only do that for a short time as like maybe a practice run, or is it officially like that across the board now?
That's across the board now. Like it's been like that. Only certain authorized retailers can accept it.
But it wasn't always like that, was it? And then at one point it started off one way, and then they did it for some reason, and then it stayed like that.
Maybe. I know. I don't know, but I know only all certain authorized retailers are able to accept it. Then even I'm guessing you have to apply for something like that. You have to be approved. And then even with that, it's only supposed to be for certain foods, foods like actual grocery foods and cold foods. You're not allowed to buy like cooked foods and things like that. And so what would happen a lot of times is like, say for some of these neighborhood gas stations, they would still allow people to buy stuff that either wasn't food or even stuff that was cooked food, and they would still allow them to pay for it in food stamps. And a lot of them would get caught up eventually. A lot of them get away with it though, even still to this day, but they're not supposed to. It's supposed to be locked to just this particular kind of food. Now, a new thing that they're doing now that they've announced, and I don't think it's across all states yet, but it's picked up momentum and it's going for a lot of states, is that they're limiting with the food stamps to where they can no longer buy candies, chips, and junk food and like drinks. It has to be like food. And even to the point I think you got certain people who filed a lawsuit against the federal government about it, right now. Because they're like, how can you tell us what we can and cannot buy? But again, that's what's being implemented already. And again, if they could use it for that programmable money, it's just a click of a button.
Okay, so it's interesting, like, because it seems on the surface when you say, well, okay, they're gonna stop letting them buy junk food and make them buy real food. However, the problem with that real food, quote unquote, real food is no good anymore.
But again, if we're comparing candy, junk food, soda, comparing that to the real food, the candy and the junk food soda is probably better because a lot of the quote unquote real food, the meat, even some of like the produce and stuff, they're injecting it with this mRNA shots and stuff.
That's the point I was getting to.
At like the farmer level and stuff.
So it seems like they're forcing people on this food now that they finished modifying and got into where they want to get it to. They're forcing people back to this food. And I just learned about the meat, how I forget the term, but they're labeling this meat. I'm gonna put it up here. I'll put it in the post production. But they're putting these labels on meat that most people won't understand, but it's identifying lab grown meat.
3D.
And a lot of the meat is lab grown. Now, it probably been going on, but now it's legal. and they can legally sell you lab grown meat in a store. Cultured, I think it's called cultured meat. If you see a label says cultured or something like that, that means lab grown. That's not, a natural animal that was slaughtered, which is, not. I guess I don't know how much better that is because they pumping these animals so much stuff.
The muscle tissue consists of fat cells and muscle cells, which are separated to produce cultured beef. By dissecting the muscle cells, individual cells can be removed and cultured. The cells from one small piece of tissue, this pioneering technique can produce more than 1 trillion strands. When all these little pieces of muscle are layered together, we get exactly the same thing we started with: beef.
Before they give them to you is crazy.
Exactly.
So now going back to the what they did with the SNAP benefits and how they're limited and controlling how you can spend the money with that. That brings me to UBI. UBI. So what do you know about UBI? Universal Basic Income, right? So universal basic income is a policy where the government gives every adult citizen a regular cash payment, no strings attached. Or no strings attached. I find that hard to believe. They say no strings attached. So UBI is a thing that's been floating around, and the government's been putting it out there. And I think they're working on that, right? They're talking about giving everybody, whatever the minimum living wages are, enough just to cover all their basic needs. So what do you? Can you speak to the UBI? UBI? You know anything about that?
Yeah, I think UBI, like you said, enough to cover their basic needs. I think UBI is going to be required. And when I say required, meaning not like forced upon you where you got to take it, but it's going to be more commonplace because AI is going to kind of take away the majority of the jobs. AI and robotics. I think that's the goal and the job of AI. And we're seeing all these mass layoffs now. We've been seeing in droves over here in America, I know. And eventually I think they're already saying that up to about 80% of the jobs that you see nowadays in the next 5 to 10 years, they're not gonna exist. And if you look at how much they're already able to augment with AI, it's quite a bit. It's quite a bit. So
Yeah.
when you look at and a lot of people who are like I say the big AI enthusiasts, the CEOs of these AI companies and things, they're just coming out already saying it, and if you really listen to what they're saying, it almost kind of for some people it sounds scary because they're like, how can y'all just say that? And to them they come off as real cold and heartless, but they're like, no, it'll be what they call a era of abundance. And you be like, how can there be abundance if nobody's working, nobody has jobs? Oh, it's because of UBI. The government's going to give you money. You see what I'm saying? And I do believe UBI is going to be implemented as a way to bring forth the adoption of CBDCs. You see what I mean? Like, hey, look, hey, we understand times are hard. You done went through this period of transition and upheaval and whatever the economic financial system was before. We know it broke for whatever reason. Maybe they broke it or this caused it to break, but now this is what we have, and in order to help get you back on your feet, we're going to give you this money. Maybe you have 5,000 in the bank. Well, we'll double it. But again, you got to get this CBDC. And you'll get a regular steady flow of 2,500 digital dollars. But again, you're going to need to get a digital ID. To attach to this digital wallet, so we'll know that we're sending who we're sending the money to, and it is going to you. And so I can see that being one of the many ways that they can go about rolling this out, and it'll be very appealing to people, especially if they called you to go without. Say
Yeah.
something happens, it's a crisis, and you go without for a month, 2, 3, 6. You're gonna take whatever they give you.
Hey, what it seems like they giving you the answer or the solution to a problem that hasn't occurred yet. Like, so we already see, so we see the solution, and we can postulate and speculate what the problem's going to be. And this has always been the case. They have a solution before the problem occurs because they create the
Problem,
problem.
reaction, solution.
Right. So, and so I'm looking. I did. Pull something up right quick. So you talk about UBI. So here's some real world experience of the UBI. All right. Several governments have tested UBI style programs. For example, in Finland ran a national experiment from 2017 to 2018. Stockton tested guaranteed income for residents, and Kenya has one of the world's largest ongoing UBI trials. So they're putting this stuff. They've been practicing and trying these things in different places. Like in Sweden, they started implementing their RFID chip. They start putting that chip in
Yeah.
people's right hand and letting them use that. They did it in other places. They did it in some places in the United States too. I want to say Wisconsin, but they did it. Some companies have done it on a small
It was
scale,
Wisconsin.
right? So
Yeah.
they're doing trials with this technology because ultimately that's what it's going to come down to.
Imagine a world where survival isn't tied to your job, where each month brings possibilities instead of bills.
Freedom to choose how you work, how you learn, or how you could help the world thrive. Too many are caught up in an endless cycle of work just to make ends meet.
Everyday choices that benefit us and the planet are weighing against our own survival.
Can I pay the rent? Can I afford food tomorrow? Can I feed my kids?
These questions are a heavy burden, overshadowing concerns for larger issues like climate change.
But what if there was a way to change this? A simple yet revolutionary idea. Universal basic income. A guaranteed unconditional income for you, for me, and for everyone.
It's not just giving free money, it's giving true freedom.
With a basic income, a single mother gets a chance not just to feed her children, but to invest in their future and education. Someone who wants to start for themselves can take the risk and innovate.
The poacher killing rhinos to feed his family finally has the choice to let them live.
And this isn't utopia. It's what studies and pilot programs over the world already have shown. But now is the time to do more than just talk.
Universal basic income. The solution proposed is universal basic income, otherwise known as UBI, and at first glance, this sounds amazing. UBI would be a guaranteed minimum income that every adult citizen would receive. You, I, and every other working age person in your country would get a regular payment from our government similar to receiving a welfare check. It would be enough to cover your most basic living expenses like rent, food and electricity. For example, maybe it's 1,000 euros per month in Germany, which isn't a lot of money in that country, but just enough to live on. And this easy monthly payment would come directly from our government with no strings attached. There are so many people that are vouching for this UBI to be rolled out as soon as possible. People like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and even Pope Francis of the Catholic Church are all supporters of universal basic income. And of course, so is the World Economic Forum leader Klaus Schwab. In certain places around the world, there have already been some successful trials of UBI in places like Finland, Japan, and Kenya, trials that included thousands of people receiving a minimum monthly payment. Those who took part in the trial said that they felt generally less stressed and happier overall, as the monthly UBI payments took away their worries of meeting their basic needs. Why I'm thinking twice. So I've been trying to figure out how to illustrate my concerns around UBI, but I figured that instead of sharing my own thoughts, I would share with you a credible source that is sharing information about the type of vision people at the top have for us. So I'm going to start referencing an article that was written in Forbes by a contributor from the WEF, the World Economic Forum, the same WEF that is run by this guy who is a huge supporter of UBI. The article is titled, "Welcome to 2030. I own nothing, have no privacy, and life has never been better. And it is written from the point of view of someone living in the futuristic global society, a society that the WEF thinks should exist less than a decade from now. I'm not going to read the whole article for you. There is a link in bio if you want to read that for yourself. I am going to focus on just one tiny paragraph from this that I think needs a little bit of attention. Once in a while, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy, nowhere I can go and not be registered. I know that somewhere, everything I do, think, and dream of is being recorded. I just hope nobody will use it against me. I'm not sure how to say this in any other way, but this is pretty terrifying to me. Again, I want to make it clear that this is an actual article that is written in a credible source by a contributor of the WEF, and furthermore, the level of control they are wanting to have in this new reality. A world where we are all living in a centralized, heavily controlled society where everything we do is logged, tracked, and recorded. A planet where we can't go anywhere or do anything or mix with the people that we want to be mixing with without the permission of our government. The very same government that will also be in control of giving us the free money we'll need to survive. And this is the crux of where I have a huge issue with the current version of UBI, and that comes down to one simple word: control. Throughout history, our governments, whenever they've had the opportunity to have a little bit of extra control over the people, they definitely take it. For example, think of the temporary restrictions that were implemented on the global aviation industry after the attacks of 9/11 happened. Over 20 years later, those temporary restrictions are still here. So if our government is responsible and in control of providing us with this free money, they are also in control of taking that money away from us. And they could potentially attach any strings to you receiving or not receiving your monthly UBI payment. And this type of control would mean that a lot of people would have to sacrifice their morals and beliefs just in order to survive. And if you don't think that these type of restrictions could happen in the world in the future, I would say think again, because we are already seeing evidence of this type of behavior around the world. In Australia, some people on welfare have to use cashless debit cards, which only allows them to spend their monthly welfare payments on certain items the government allows them to buy. In China, citizens can already lose their rights to buy plane and train tickets, get access to bank loans, and even have their passports cancelled just for saying negative things about the government. And only a couple of days ago, the Canadian government began freezing the bank accounts of protesters who they deem to be a nuisance. If the vast majority of humanity becomes unemployed in the next few decades, maybe UBI will be the only solution to the problem. Maybe it will be our only choice. Or maybe there are other solutions, like people that don't want to be part of the system learning to take care of themselves and living in small, self-sustainable communities that don't need the government's support. Whatever happens, one thing is almost certain in this fourth industrial revolution, the way that some people would like it to play out, and that is that they will have more control than ever before in history. Here's the question: do we trust our governments to do the right thing with this new level of power and control they would have over us? I think for myself, the answer would be no. However, if this is the type of world that we are moving towards, it is important to consider what it is that we're trading in return. Money for freedom and personal sovereignty. I know what kind of world I would want my children to grow up in. Maybe there's other solutions that we're not looking at, and maybe this isn't the only way.
So you will own nothing and be happy. You will own nothing and be happy. And so when we talk about UBI not owning anything, because you're not working, you're not in a position to own anything, to purchase anything, but you're going to be happy. Why? Because life will be seemingly the same. You'll be reaping all the benefits with less effort, seems like, right? And it may start that way, but eventually it's going to come down to total control. And what are your thoughts on that? You will own nothing and be happy.
Well, I think to a certain extent, we're already getting used to it.
Thank you. You went there.
We're already getting used to it.
That's where I was about to go. Well, go ahead, speak on it.
If you look at the subscription services,
thank you.
You know,
Yes.
You don't own movies, you don't own TV shows anymore, you don't own music. You know, it's all streamed from online, you know, even the video games, you know. when I would play games and stuff like digital copies, people download it all the time. I was like, I like to go buy the hard copy. Let me get the hard copy of the game because what if the digital isn't available anymore one day? And so even just with that right there, we're already gotten used to not actually owning things that we used to be able to tangibly own, and so I can definitely see how that's gonna kind of take off because again, it'll also be touted as like, hey, look, why worry about having to deal with a mortgage and qualifying and doing all of those things? You don't really have to be financially responsible. Just let us deal with all of that. You still got a house to live in. As long as you got a roof over your head, you're good. You see what I mean? And essentially, and man, I feel so old when I talk about like the younger generation.
Yeah.
Because I know that's how our parents and stuff used to talk about us.
Right. But
But it's like
the
I
truth
see
is,
them and I be like, I don't know how. I don't see it. I don't see, and it's not blanket across the board, but a lot of them, it's at least in the Western world, man, they're so they don't want for much. They're so programmed with just in their phones and social media and what they see in their immediate vicinity. They could really care less about too much of anything else. And
yeah.
so I could really see a lot of them, not all of them, but the vast majority of them being satisfied with, oh, I don't have to own it because I still got access to it.
Right, right.
So
Well,
it
yeah,
doesn't matter.
because when you own something, like if you own a house and say you're renting your house out, it's a lot of maintenance. Like it's a lot of money that go into it, a lot of upkeep, a lot of effort to owning something. When you own something, you got to maintain it. You got to keep it up. You got to repair things when they get damaged. You have to do all these different things. And it's not as simple as, oh, it's mine and now I can just enjoy it. It's a lot of upkeep to that, a lot of maintenance to that, a lot of effort that goes into owning and maintaining things. And so I think it is easier to rent. It is easier to subscribe to something. All the movies you get on Netflix, for example, if you had all them DVDs, where you gonna put all them DVDs at? Then you got to make sure they don't get scratched up. You got to make sure the DVD player don't, you got to replace the DVD players every so many years. Nothing, no electronics gonna last forever. So there's an appeal, and especially like you said, I was thinking the same thing with the younger generation. But that goes to show you we're already in a space where we're owning less and less things, and we're happy to do it. You will own nothing and be happy, right? Because I thought about that. I said, man, I was realizing the same thing. Like we don't, well, not we, but this where things are going now as a whole, less and less things are available for us to own. And it starts off simple with just, games and entertainment. But where does it stop? And that's what people don't realize. And the people who do realize is the older generation, they're on their way out. We're approaching the halfway point of our life. Some of us at the halfway point. So the next generation, it's normal for them. Especially, you think about a 10-year-old. Some 10-year-olds may have never owned a cartridge or a CD of a game. They've always done it digital. They always rented or did a subscription online. That's all they know. That's normal. There's nothing wrong with it. And so in 20 years, when we're in our 60s, they're going to be 30 years, a 10-year-old going to be 30 years old. And he's never owned nothing. And he's happy. This is normal. This has been his whole life. And what's wrong with it? Nothing been wrong with it. So you're talking about the total control because somebody owned it.
Somebody getting paid from it.
Somebody owned it. Somebody controlled it. That's why I like Dr. Claude Anderson. He always talks about how us as a people, our biggest issue is that we own and control nothing. You got a lot of melanated millionaires and billionaires more than ever before in history, but we still only own and control 1/2 of 1% of the nation's wealth.
Yeah.
Even with all these billionaires, we don't control nothing. We own and control basically nothing. And then when we do own something, control it, then we get forced out or sell it, because some people, they realize control is more important than money. I think about like BET.
Mm.
What happened? Well, they gave control, ownership to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
now,
look what happened.
what do we get from BET now?
Slop.
I think probably the younger generation don't even know what BET is because it's irrelevant. So when we had a channel that catered to our, I won't say our needs, but catered to our culture. Thank you. It wasn't the greatest, it wasn't the best, but it was ours, and we enjoyed it. And now, what do we get from BET? I don't know nobody who watch BET no more.
Nah, me either. I mean, what it is now is it is what, unfortunately, it still shows our culture, but it's a grim look at what our culture has actually become. And when I say our culture, I mean in the Western world. You know, what they see from Black people in the Western world is what they show on BET nowadays. If you look at the BET Awards, man, nah.
They
If
still
you
have the
look,
BET Awards?
they do. Yeah. Believe it or not, they do, but it's a bunch of rituals. It's a bunch of hedonism, you know, is nothing, it's completely wicked and nothing godly about it. You know, and even when it comes to a majority of the TV shows, they do exist. Like if I'm not mistaken, I think Tyler Perry now has like a controlling ownership interest or something in BET, if I'm not mistaken, has for a couple of years. And so if you look at the majority of the programming and the type of stuff that he put out, yeah, that's BET now, you know. And so again, you you have that type of misleading direction as far as that's where the culture is going, you know. It's almost like art imitating life and then life imitating art. Like it's a vicious cycle.
Right.
You know, kind of like the symbol of the snake eating itself, you know.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you see now with our culture, whether it's what's coming out of BET, whether it's coming on the music, whether it's I want to say I think it's a black guy that owns like the Zeus network where they have all these different programming and it's just I call it ratchet TV. You know, like that's the youth now.
But
Unfortunately,
but what you see is that somebody's controlling the image of our people. It's not us. We don't own nothing.
well, it's the sellouts of us, the
Yeah.
sellouts.
Well, I mean, but the because media has such an influence and it goes to the masses. That's why you saw my people in other countries, their perception of us is what it is because we're not controlling the image that's being pushed out to the masses, to the world of us, because we don't own anything, we don't control anything. And I'm not speaking absolute, but we don't own enough of anything to make a impact on how the world views us. So that's just one example. So going back to this programmable money and what's it called?
UBI.
CBDC. I'm sorry, I'm thinking about universal basic income. That's something that's and you guys look this up. It's coming down the line. They got things and plans for it. So they're planning on taking total control. Now I want to kind of dial it back because that's kind of future stuff going into it. And now I want to go back to what's happening right now with these wars. You know, Christ talked about in the book of Matthew, wars and rumors of wars, and we're seeing these wars now. We have been telling people for a long time that America was going to go to war with Iran and Iran was going to change the game. That might really be the end of America. Now, I would like to be wrong. And you know, and once again, this is interpretation of prophecy. So I could very well be wrong. However, now America is at war with Iran. Got that part right. What's going on? According to the information that's, I would say behind the scenes, down the surface, because you can't look at the media and what they're talking about because it's a lot going on with that's not being talked about in the media. Like, have you seen the images of Israel being bombed?
I have. I think so.
You've seen it. How many people do you know that's aware that Israel is being bombed to smithereens right now?
Not many. It's not really broadcast on the mainstream media. You know, you gotta kind of do a little bit more alternative searching and kind of look at more of the sources that kind of deal with just the facts of, and not really taking one side or another to kind of run across that. But yeah, I have seen some of those images, and I
Yeah, I
do
talked.
know the majority of people they don't really have a clue.
Yeah, because it's not something you see. Because the media is like they giving a whole nother narrative, or they just kind of don't talk about it.
Hmm.
And from what I understand, being on this side of the world, I'm talking to people that's near these countries, that's going in and out of certain these areas in certain countries, and they're saying, "Listen, man, Iran is wreaking havoc right now, and they're pushing America out. They're bombing all the American bases and where America got set up shop in these different countries because they make it seem like Iran is bombing these other countries, and they're not. They're bombing military bases or military strongholds in those countries, and they're pushing
Hmm.
them out of those countries and out of the region, and they're meleeing Israel. They blowing to smithereens. So what's going on? What do you see this in prophecy? And how does this tie to your understanding? How does this tie to the UBDC? Am I not the UBD, the CBDC?
So I think I think it's not exactly as what it appears. Is there bombings and all of that going on? Yes, there is. I think it's very targeted, but I also think it's already been previously agreed upon. You know, I think there was certain deals that were made prior to this escalation, that basically said that, you know what, we need to reshape the Middle East because here it is. They're trying to bring forth a new order of things. The established order that we see today existed post World War II under Bretton Woods, where they decided that the United States was going to be the world reserve currency and it was backed by gold, and all these different countries would peg their currencies to the dollar and they would buy the United States treasuries and hold dollars and things like that. Well, that old programming is dying now. It has run its course. They can only prop it up for so much longer without having some type of event to kind of bring forth some type of correction and move it into a new system. So they're kind of it's reached its peak, and here it is. The financial industrial complex. I guess we're talking your banks, we're talking all your major corporate interests, your Vanguards, your BlackRock, your State Street. Um, they've decided to a point to where that they're no longer getting the best returns on their investments in America anymore because America is now at a point to where it is being lowered, on the world stage. It's being lowered when it comes to influence, it's being lowered when it comes to power, and they're more so looking to bring their divestments elsewhere all around the world because again, we're talking multinational companies. They're not restricted to just America. They have assets in all other countries and BRICS. If we're being honest, if you look at the amount of countries that are involved in BRICS and who they're targeting, BRICS is targeting what they call the global South. The global South is typically all your countries that have been third world countries for all these many decades and things, but now they're more so emerging economies. These are emerging markets, the global South. All the places where have been on the bottom. Now they're the ones who are due to make a rise. Because they've fleeced America already. They've gotten what they're going to get out of Babylon. So now at this point, it's more so about focusing on the future. Where are the future consumers at? Because America and the Western world as consumers is tapped out. The money is dying, and most of Americans don't know it yet, but they're going to be on the opposite end holding the bag. So the people who control the money and the capital have already decided, well, you know what, we're kind of done with America as much money as we can get. It's time to bring the money back to the East. It's time to bring the money back that direction because that is the future. You see what I'm saying? The future is in the Middle East, North Africa, in Africa in itself, in Asia. You see what I'm saying? So therefore, we have to make this transition. But the problem is, under the old order, the state of Israel and Iran, that conflict that existed, it was allowed to exist for a reason because it was profitable. Who
Okay,
was it?
stop right
Okay.
there. Stop right there. I want to interject real quick for everybody to keep up. So you mentioned BRICS, and so
Okay.
believe it or not, so a lot of people still don't know what BRICS is. A lot of people never heard of BRICS, especially in America, because what does it have to do with America? So just to explain what BRICS is, BRICS, BRICS. BRICS is a group of major emerging economies that cooperate on economics, trade, and global political influence. So it's a group of countries that's coming together to operate on a financial scale outside of America, outside of the Western countries, right? So the original name comes from the first five members of the first five countries, right? Brazil, Russia, India, China, South America, BRICS, BRICS, BRICS. Okay, so, and this came in 2001. The acronym was coined by a guy named Jim O'Neill in 2001. When South Africa joined in 2010, it became BRICS. So South Africa came in 2010. Now this has been going on, right? So what is BRICS trying to do, right? They're trying to increase economic cooperation. They're trying to reduce dependence on Western financial systems. So they're trying to get from under the central banking system. Okay, expand trade between member nations, increase their influence in global institutions. So basically, they're trying to become a financial power outside of the Western world. This is what you were talking about as far as, America going down. So this is directly rivaling and impacting the power of the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is what's going on. So there's a phrase called silent weapons for quiet wars. Y'all, I think it's a book as well. Y'all need to look that up. Silent weapons for quiet wars.
So
Go
that's
ahead.
a chapter. That's a chapter in Behold the Pale Horse.
Oh,
by
okay,
William
that's
Cooper.
what it is. Go ahead, continue. Yeah, I actually got that book over there so you can see it.
Yeah.
Where is it? I'm on the camera. You see it right there.
Yeah, I see it right there. Yeah, I got
Behold
it.
the
Yeah.
yeah. I'm okay. So I'm thinking it's a book. Yeah. So yeah, Silent Weapons of Quiet War. So it makes me think about what's going on with ICE. And here's what I understand. Here's what I understand to be going on. When you had was it Venezuela and was it Cuba?
Mm-hmm.
They were in business with Russia and China.
Mm-hmm.
And they were doing business kind of, dealing with this BRICS situation, right? Trying to basically get off the petrodollar and start doing business outside the petrodollar. And America had to stop that from happening. People think that Trump went over there for the oil. He didn't go over there for the oil. He went over there to stop Russia and China from dealing with getting oil, right? Because there's a war going on between Russia, China, Iran, and America. Iran, some spokesman in Iran recently came out and said, "Listen, you want to start a fight? We're ready for war. We've been planning for this war for 20 years. America not gonna win this war. We've been waiting on this. We've been planning this for the last 20 years. We've been planning this war out, and as much trouble as y'all having with us right now, we got Russia and China backing us." Now, we've been telling people this since 2010, and the people before us was telling people since the 70s that this was going to happen. When it was going to happen, may have gotten that part wrong. But we've been saying this because the Bible said it. The Bible prophesied it. It was told in the book of Isaiah that this was going to happen. So now they got to stop China and Russia. So we went to Venezuela, took over that situation. I think something with Cuba as well, because they were letting China and Russia actually set up shop over there, that's strategic, that's military. I'm gonna say it's a strategic military placement for them to be there, because now they can get their missiles and bombs over to America from there a lot closer. So then they also started. Right now, there's a lot of stuff going on with Greenland, because they don't want people in Greenland because Greenland is too close. So you don't hear a lot about that in the media, but that's happening as well. America is trying to make sure that we have control over Greenland, and Russia and China, Iran, nobody can set up shop over there as well. Then you talk about all the sleeper cells that have been allowed to come into the Americas. So what I'm seeing now is that all this stuff about the borders in Mexico, it wasn't about keeping Mexicans out. I don't think so much as it was about not allowing all these sleeper cells to come into America through Mexico. About a couple years ago, they stopped a bus in Mexico with like 100 and something Egyptians coming from from Mexico into America. So I ain't no telling who all and how many people are being smuggled from Mexico to America. So how many sleeper cells in America? So now you have ICE. ICE is going around and they deporting people, and everybody make it seem like, oh, they're deporting Mexicans, and which they may be deporting a lot of Mexicans, but it's deeper than that. What I really believe is that they're fighting this war, and they understand we got to get these people out of here. There's a lot of people here that are on the ground that are working for other countries, and we got to get them out of here. And to me, that explains why ICE is able to shoot people in the middle of the street. And I'm talking about European Americans. When you shoot a European American white woman or woman, blonde hair, whatever, they gonna stop the press. But now, they shooting women, European women in the streets. What happened? Nothing. Business as usual, because it's a much bigger situation. Yeah, some Americans lost their lives, but we trying to save the country. So you got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right? So unfortunately, some Americans lost their lives, but more importantly, we got to get these sleeper cells out of here. I think that's what's happening. I think that's why they're letting ICE run amok, because they're fighting this war. This war is being fought on many fronts. So what we see going on in Iran on the public scale, that's one thing. But this war has been going on. It's going to continue to go on, and it's a lot deeper than just what we're seeing on the news with Iran and Israel. However, getting back to that, my understanding, I want you to chime in on this too. My understanding with that is that what's really going on in these countries, that we see a lot of turmoil in a lot of countries. You got India fighting, and you had in 2001, after 9/11 happened, there was a general on the 20th of September, I believe. He said he got documents said that we were going to invade 7 countries in 5 years. It was, and I'm not saying them in the order, I'm just saying the ones because I'm trying to go off memory. So you had Libya, Sudan, Somalia, Syria, what was the last two? It was
Iraq and
Syria.
Iran.
Huh?
Was it Iraq and Iran?
Iran was the last one on the list, but there's another one I can't think of. But all these countries
Lebanon.
Lebanon. Yep, Lebanon and Iran. And so all these countries have now been invaded by America into some form, or one form. Maybe we didn't actually bomb them or whatever, but we've invaded all those places. And if not fully taken over, in the process of taking over the central banking system in all those places. And Iran is the last holdout. Iran is the biggest holdout. So what it seems, though, America is being used as a tool to invade these countries in order for the elites to take over the central banking system in those countries. And once they've taken over once they have the central banking system in all these key places, then the digital currency can be rolled out completely. The CBDC can be completely rolled out, and then we have an entirely new monetary system, because it's going to be hard for them to do a digital banking system when you still have other countries that are an alternative, where they can go, where people can say, well, I'm just going to go to this country. I'm not going to deal with it. I'm going to go to this country. I'm going to go over here, And because you remember, Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, he was going to put up $100 billion worth of gold to start a whole new monetary system in Africa, where Africa will be its own banking system.
Mm-hmm.
And Africa has all the resources right now. Without Africa, the world's economy is done. And so they got rid of him. They drug him through the streets. They made an example. Not to mention he had enough water under Libya to supply Africa for a lifetime. And so they're taking control of the central banks. I think that's what this is really about.
If you go back to 9/11, and when Wesley Clark said we're gonna invade 7 countries in 5 years. What you were talking about were the countries where those central banks were not on board to do programmable money.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran."
And their governance structures were not on board with essentially, because of Epstein, I'll call it the Rockefeller Rothschild model. There was an effort to say, okay, we're going to basically assert control of the central banks in those countries. That's my interpretation. And I think one of the reasons we're seeing so much tension around Iran is because Iran right now is the big leakage in the system. Iran's central bank counts. One of the reasons it counts is because their oil and energy is very important, including for China.
Yeah.
And that's very important in the BRICS system. What the BRICS system is trying to do is to create independent payment systems. But if you're going to come out with programmable money, with digital IDs that are interoperable globally and programmable money that controls in each jurisdiction centrally, you can't afford leakage. And so you've got way too much leakage in the system to proceed with what they're trying to do. And Iran and the BRIC nations are a sticking point. And certainly Iran's oil, feeding China gives China greater independence. And I think what you're looking at, I think part of the state of play with both Russia and Iran is how are you going to make sure that those central banks are entirely in the system?
Explain what the control grid is, what it looks like, and what it means.
So the control grid is a process or an infrastructure that allows digital technology to be used to assert phenomenal surveillance and control of people.
Yes.
And at the very heart of it is what I call programmable money. So it's money that is no longer just a currency. It's money that comes with a set of rules that can be surveilled and forced. So imagine back in the pandemic, if your money, if I said, okay, you've got a lockdown and your money won't work if you leave your house. You can't buy gas in your car because your money is programmed with AI and software to enforce a whole set of centralized rules. And programmable money allows the bankers who've been running monetary policy to now control fiscal policy and essentially replace legislatures and executive branch by making and enforcing the rules through the money. Now that requires a large infrastructure of surveillance. So you need digital IDs, and then you need the hardware locally and globally to do the surveillance and implementation.
And to be fair, I guess, for lack of a better word, it's multiple things. It might not just be solely that reason, but I think that's a big part of it is that they want to get control of these central banking systems so they can implement their plans of the CBDC. Because once they implement the CBDC, it's over. You either in the system and you're functioning, or you're living off grid, growing food, farming. You're gonna be back in the in the you're gonna be back in the 1800s while everybody else is dealing with technology and enjoying the luxuries of life. But I said a lot right there. What do you think? Where you at with that?
I mean, I tend to agree with it for the most part. I don't know that they'll be able to fully implement a CBDC worldwide at one time. I think it's going to be rolled out in stages, and some countries are going to be further ahead than others. I really think the Western world, namely America, and then a lot of parts of Europe, Western Europe, they're going to be the most draconian in the beginning. That's where you're going to see more so like once it's rolled out, it's going to be the things to where it's kind of like I talk about in loop, like it's going to come upon the world like a snare. It's going to catch people off guard. And it'll be a situation where some people, everybody, a lot of people will want to move around, but they're not going to be able to. They're not
Mhm.
going to be able to afford to move. You see what I mean? They're not going to have the money. The money might not work in the way that it needs to for them to get to where they need to get to. So, I think it's going to be a lot of that going on, and as they perfect it in America and in Western Europe, it'll slowly start trickling in these other places. But that's one of the things that BRICS has going for it is that, hey, you could come be a part of BRICS and not have to deal with a lot of the things that you suffering with in America or in Western Europe. So but I do believe that is the goal. But again, I don't know. I don't think that, well, it's hard to say that this war or these things that we're seeing right now, if this is what's going to really lead to the ultimate like destruction of America by like Iran and whatnot. I still think that's probably a little bit further on down the line, you
Mhm.
know. Um, and that's based on prophecy, because I know even for that to happen, there's certain things that have to kind of take place. But yeah, I'm the way I kind of look at it is it's more so that this is more so part of them trying to bring Iran into the fold, and a lot of the old hardliners who originally were like from the old regime back from when the revolution of Iran happened, like in like 79 or something.
Yeah.
And they really kind of changed over or whatever. They had to kind of get rid of a lot of those. So you notice they've been assassinating a lot of the leaders of Iran over the last few years, even
Mhm.
going back to when Trump was in office. They've been assassinating them, and they just assassinated like the Ayatollah, I think. And so
Ayatollah, I think it's yeah.
yeah. And so these are people who they wasn't going to allow entry into the world system. They weren't going for integration. They weren't going for a peaceful existence with Israel, not in the current state. So
Mhm.
it's to the point to where it's like, well, hey, they have certain people who was a part of that regime, but also understands the new vision. And it's like, okay, well, look, we're willing to cooperate, but they knew they would have to take certain losses on Iran, and just like all the other countries involved have to take certain losses. I really think America, I think you got certain, like, it's levels to it. You got certain people who are like, yeah, we got to get these sleeper cells out of here. We got to fight for America. We got to do what we can. But then you got those on the upper levels who already know ain't nothing we can do about it. This is a sinking ship. It's Titanic. It's going down. We've already built bunkers for ourselves. We already have private islands. You understand? We only put Trump in here to sell the dream that America still has hope. That's why Trump is in there. Trump is absolutely aware that America is being demoted and brought down low. He's here to make you feel good about it while it's happening, to still give you hope. Just like Obama gave black people hope in the system, Trump is in there to give white people hope in the system. You see what I'm saying? But it's over. It is over.
You
There's
know,
no stopping this demotion.
now I will say, man, about the Trump thing. I've been persuaded to at least consider that Trump was not exactly how they planned on things to go. Like maybe I don't know. I don't know, because Trump. It's a lot of stuff that Trump is doing behind the scenes that don't get talked about. It's a lot of things that Trump is doing that more aligned with the Bible than what people would think.
What
You
you mean,
know, as
like with the
far
abortion and things like that?
I mean, bringing prayer to the White House.
Yeah.
You know, where they're doing prayer meetings in the White House on a weekly basis. Um, you know, it's just a lot. It's a lot of little things I've been hearing and learning about. I'm like, huh. So I wonder how much of a monkey wrench Trump is.
I
You know,
think
maybe this Iran thing wasn't supposed to start just now. Maybe you know what I'm saying. I don't know. I don't. It's that's a questionable things with the whole Trump thing, man. But I want to ask you about this.
okay.
Did you want to respond to that before?
Well, all I was gonna say was that I believe that becoming president is fluid. It's different depending on who you are and what you bring to the table. I believe he's allowed to do certain things long as he hits certain bottom line agenda points. Look, this is what we want you to do.
Yeah.
Long as you do this, we don't care what you do over here. You can sell the image and make it seem as though like, hey, you're doing this, you're fighting as hard as you can, and maybe you are. But again, long as you hit these points, we don't care. If you don't hit these points, we will kill you. That's how it's run. So very well could be like, hey, well, look, he's the candidate that they got, but you got to look at the backing. Nobody becomes president, nobody gets political office unless the money is there. The money is there. He was
Yeah,
back.
they're
He
not
had
gonna
all
give up
the political
control.
campaign.
They're not gonna give up control. So I don't know that part is a big question mark. It seems like it may not be as people seem with that. Okay, so going back to this Iran thing, here's something else that came up. I talked about it earlier, but I'm gonna share it with the people here and just get your thoughts on it because we've been talking about this for years. This letter that Albert Pike wrote, right? So for people who don't know who Albert Pike is, you gotta look this guy up, right? Albert Pike, ALBERTPIKE. PIKE. Yeah, Albert Pike. So in 1871, there was somebody said they went to this library and they found this letter in a book. Okay, so it was a letter that was written from Albert Pike to I can't pronounce this guy's name.
Like Mazzani.
No, Giuseppe. I think Giuseppe Mazzani. Mazzini. Yeah, Mazzini. I think something like that. Giuseppe Mazzini in 1871 regarding a conspiracy involving 3 world wars. So in 1871, and this letter's in. It says this letter was on display in the British Museum Library in London until 1977. So until 1977, you can go see this letter on display in a museum in Britain. And he talks now. Albert Pike was I don't know if he had started the Masons, but he's a high-ranking Mason. He was a Satanist.
33rd degree.
Yeah, 33rd degree Mason. He was a Satanist, very wicked person, and he basically spelled out the First World War. He spelled out the Second World War, and he spelled out the Third World War. Now, this is interesting because this is what he said about the Third World War, and I'll put it up on the screen for you guys to see. But he says, let me just share it. Let me see if I can do this. Yeah, let me just I'll go ahead and share it now so you guys can see the whole thing. Let me know when you can see this, Zara. Can you see that?
Yep.
All right. So here's the Third World War. So I for you guys can see it, right? So Albert Pike letter to Mazzini, the Illuminati plan for 3 world wars, August 15, 1871. He goes through, this is kind of introduction to it. So you see he has, in short, this is the plan for the First World War. This is the plan for the Second World War. Now, these two happen, for the most part, according to their plans. So this is how they plan the Third World War. It says, the Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the agentur of the Illuminati between political Zionists and leaders of Islamic world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionists mutually destroy each other. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, spiritual, and economic exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists. This part is very interesting to me. And we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horrors will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and the most bloody turmoil. So nihilists are people who don't believe in anything. They believe that we're a clump of cells and that there's no moral compass. You know, it don't matter right or wrong, good or bad. That's all irrelevant. So they can pretty much do whatever they want to do. And this is what they're going to do to kind of get rid of the rest of the world's religions, right? And then it says, then everywhere, the citizens obliged to defend themselves against the world minority, which of revolutionaries, which I think are going to be the nihilists and the atheists, will exterminate those destroyers of civilizations and the multitude disillusioned with Christianity, whose deistic spirits will from that moment be without compass or direction, anxious for an idea, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the true light through the universal manifestation of the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. So once they let the atheists and the nihilists run rampant and clean up, destroy everything else that's there. And to what degree we don't know, but they said he said, there's gonna be the most bloody turmoil on. So the people, so basically, atheists gonna have their shot at running the world and doing what they think, because religion is the problem. Because people talk about religious wars because this thing with Israel and Iran ultimately is gonna be seen as a religious. It's religious. The whole thing is about religion, right? Islam versus Judaism. And then you got Christianity in the middle. And then they're gonna let the atheists say, look, we got the solution. And it's gonna be a bloody turmoil. It's gonna be crazy. So the world gonna see like we gotta get rid of these people. These people are a problem. But now by this point, everybody's in a defeated state. Because you gotta look at the Christians who's saying, well, man, where's God in all this? Where's God? How is he letting this happen? And this is because of the lie that people have believed about the Bible, about the rapture and all these things. They're going to think that Christians not supposed to experience this. That's a lie. That's not what, you don't read that in the book of Revelations. It don't tell you, because like Brother Martin said on the previous show, you can check it out. But he said, basically, if the Bible tells us to endure to the end and we're going to be raptured, then what are we enduring? So you got to do your research on the rapture and where that came from. That came from a dream that some European American had. I don't know if she was a European American, but some European little girl had a dream, and that became a whole doctrine. So that's a whole other thing. But so after that, everybody's looking for, when things get so bad, everybody start looking for a savior. They're looking for a way out. And then they're going to introduce according to him, the pure doctrine of Lucifer, brought finally out in the public view. And it says this manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement. So people's reaction to everything that's happening, which will follow the destruction. So it's going to come right after the destruction of Christianity and atheism. So everything's going to kind of destroy people's belief system. And we're going to see what atheists are, the problem with them, how much destruction they cause. So everybody's going to be saying, well, no, we definitely want to get rid of these atheists. We can't. That's not it. You got to believe in something, because these people don't have no limitation. They'll drop a nuke somewhere. Whatever. They're going to be allowed to run rampant and show how sadistic and how destructive they can be. And so the world's going to agree, we don't need atheists running nothing. We got to get rid of that. But then the belief in the Bible and in Christ and all this stuff is going to be so dwindled because of all the false doctrines and the lack of understanding of how things are supposed to play out. People are not going to lose belief in God. The Bible talks about it, that if it was so, the elect would be deceived. And then Christ said, I come when I come, at least there be none left. And it's going to get so bad that people's faith is really going to be tested. And then after that, it says both conquer and exterminate at the same time. So they're going to conquer and exterminate Christianity and atheism at the same time. That's their plan. But it starts with the Islamic world versus Israel. And that's going to divide the rest of the world, right? That's going to divide the rest of the world, and everybody's going to pick a side. So where we at right now, we see China and Russia siding essentially with the Islamic world. Then you have Israel and the Western world, which is majority Christianity. So you got Israel, you got the Catholics, which is a major faction. Then you got America, which is purportedly a Christian country. And so here's the divide. And then now it seems like this plan is on track to play out. What thoughts? What do you think about that? That's a lot.
I think that's their plan. But I think in the midst of that, it's going to be so many things that are going to go wrong that they can't account for, that it's going to cause a divergence. It's going to cause a divergence. That's what I believe. Because again, when you look at their plans, typically, they're this over like a multi-year thing. It's not a 1 to 2 years. It's probably over. It's things that took place over the span of 5-10 years at least. You know, and so again, I would be looking at the same thing with that plan in there. But I think in the midst of that, um, working their plan, you got a lot of Bible prophecy that's going to take place. You know, and I think what they're not accounting for is um the thing that God is going to do for his people, you know, and those whom he gathered to himself, because it seems like to me, the worse the world gets, it's gonna be kind of like it was in ancient Egypt. And all those plagues were happening, and the Egyptians were just suffering, going through it. But then you look over there in Goshen and God's people in there, and they was like, hey, we good, And so I think there's going to be a place for the true believers and those who are truly walking with the Most High. That even in the midst of the storm, it's going to be God's people who are going to be moving and being ushered in a certain direction, to avoid um a lot of the destruction. And an example I give you is, like, have you heard the reports from the people, like a lot of people who was like in Gaza, who, man, been getting dreams of Christ?
Reports that Gaza's Christians are serving their community, and Jesus is appearing to people in dreams and visions. Gary Lane has the story.
Amid tragedy and suffering, God is intervening in war-torn Gaza.
About 200 Gazans gave their heart to Jesus in one lump sum, because the Lord appeared to them in visions and dreams, and they were hugging each other and rejoicing, and realized that all of them had the same vision that each one of them had.
Taysir Sada is a former PLO sniper and aide to Yasser Arafat.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. That's something I should probably do a detailed podcast about. So if I remember, man, most I will not be able to look into that and bring out some information on that as well, because that's very interesting.
But
so yeah, I'm just saying, man, like, so now all this is leading up to what I believe all this is leading up to the mark of the beast, written up in Revelations, right? Both rich and poor, great and small, will receive a mark in their right hand or on their forehead, and without this mark, they won't be able to buy or sell. And I think that's what it's coming down to. I think that's the whole purpose of the CBDC system. It's to create a system where they have total control of the money, and they can program the money, and eventually this will, we talk about the convenience, going back to the convenience. So a credit card was more convenient than cash. A cash app and having everything on a cell phone is even more convenient than a credit card, because now it's right there. Most people got their credit cards in their hand. So then eventually they're going to get it's going to be some kind of technology that's going to be etched into the hand or on the forehead, to where now all you got to do is scan. You can just boom. And they've already done this on a much smaller scale. So the RFID Verichip, I think is the last seed of the mark of the beast. Now, the RFID Vera chip may not be the mark of the beast, but I think it's the, excuse me, I think it's the foundation of it because it's implantable. It's an implantable device that works on the body heat, the transfer of heat in your body that keeps it going. So it doesn't need a battery. It goes into you. They've already started in Sweden and other places. They've already injected this chip in thousands of people who participated in this in their hand, and they can use it for their smart homes to open their doors. It's very difficult to hack, or they're working on technology to make it almost unhackable. But because it will attach to your biology, so it's going to be difficult to. I mean, it's going to be almost impossible to fake identity with this because it attaches to your biological makeup, and they have a certain film or encasing that the body will not reject it, at least initially.
Mm-hmm.
Something else interesting about it is that I think it works on it has lithium in it or something like that. And if that lithium ever ruptures, it's going to create these boils and these sores on the body. And Revelation talks about everybody who received this mark of the beast at some point is going to have these boils and these sores all over their body. So I'm wondering if these things will rupture after a time, or there's going to be some kind of electronic interference that will cause these things to rupture as well, and all these people who have this mark will break out with these boils and these sores. So there's a lot of things that kind of point to this as something, that could really possibly
be the mark.
Yeah. So like I said, I don't think this is exactly it. Is this for the Lucifer rays?
This is fun. This is something that Bill Gates been funding.
Yeah.
And it's done hit a new plateau to where like it'll put a QR code on your hand.
Yeah, I saw that. And so it's a mark. It could be a mark. So now does it interact with the person's biology? Like can it
Yeah, it punctures the skin.
Yeah. Interesting. And this was something they were trying to do with this vaccine passport when they were trying to, because see that whole COVID thing, they did a lot of beta testing. They did a lot of beta testing with the technology during that time, and it was to see how people were going to respond. Elder Gabor did a podcast. It was really good, man. You got to check it out. But he talked about game theory. Are you familiar with game theory?
Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with it.
Okay, so game theory, you got to go check it out. But he talked about how the elites, this is what they're learning. They're learning game theory, and I think that a lot of that game theory was being tested out and applied during the COVID thing to see how people was going to respond, react to this and to that, and a lot of things they did temporarily or permanent. A lot of things that was implemented are permanent now. So so with this mark of the beast, whether it's the RFID chip or not, or like I said, it's going to be a technology based on that's going to evolve from that, because the RFID chip came out when? Let me see.
Like the 90s?
I think before that, because I got a video of the guy who invented it.
Much of our research data had been publicized, and some men came to us that we were to find out were from the government. They were from the CIA and the FBI. And they asked us to develop a little microchip for identification. This was to be used not in human beings, not in animals, but to be put in drug shipments to catch drug dealers. They came with a lot of money, and so we were willing to do whatever we could. I want to tell you at this point that I was not a Christian, and I did not want anything to do with Christians. We had developed the first identification device, and it was completed in the early 70s. They came back to us and they said, we want something better than that. And so we said, if you have enough money, we can develop anything. We began to work on the design of a microchip that, when it was completed, was 0.75 millimeters in diameter, 7 millimeters long. It was the size of 1/4 of a grain of rice. Again, I want to say that I was not a Christian and there were no Christians there. They said they wanted this to have a power source and be able to emit a signal. And they told us they wanted us to use lithium as a battery source. Lithium's used in watch batteries, it's used in heart pacemaker batteries, it's used in a lot of places. I designed into this microchip a little charging circuit that would charge that battery. This sounds like a lot of technical things coming together, but if you'll bear with me 1 minute, you'll see what God has laid out about this microchip. When we discovered that we needed to be able to charge that battery, I needed a temperature change, a change in temperature to cause current to flow through that little charging circuit that would charge the battery. So we began to investigate and find out where in the body does the temperature change the most rapidly. We spent over $1 million in taxpayer money, and when the results came back, there was a lot of information. We divided it up amongst 3 teams and then came back together with that information. It was determined that there were 2 places in the body that were ideal for the microchip. One was just below the hairline on the forehead. Every mother checks their child's temperature right here. So we could have paid the mothers $1 million and saved. I never saw a mother check their child's temperature on their ankle, always right here. The other place was the hand, the right hand preferred, because most people are right-handed. This didn't bother me, and it didn't bother anybody else on the team. The hand seemed a good place. Nobody wanted it here. And so the design work, everything was completed. The microchip was done. You're seeing it now on some of the Discovery Channel presentations. There are people who have received it already. It is real. It's not something that's coming way down the road. They gave me a Bible. They told me not to read the book of Revelation. They said the book of Revelation is too hard to understand. So I waited, and I didn't read the book of Revelation for quite some time. Then one day I came to Revelation 13, verse 16. And he caused us all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead. I didn't like what I saw. I went back and looked up the word mark. I went to the Strong's Concordance, and I found that John had used 3 words for the word mark. Charagma, charicator, and charax. That was from the Greek. I looked at those words. They talked about a scratch or an etching. They talked about a lot of things. And I said, God, this isn't it. We didn't do it. He said, go to the word for 666. The word is chixastigma. In the Greek, it says to go to 4742 as a cross, the last half of the word chixastigma. And when I looked at what it says stizo, i.e. to stick, to prick, a mark incised or punched into for recognition of ownership. I thought about the little injection tool. The end of it is called an incisor. I began to weep and I began to cry, and I said, oh God, what have we done? What I want to tell you is that this is real. The microchip implant is real. Credit cards are failing. They can be counterfeited. The new smart card can be counterfeited. They can be stolen. They can be lost. All kinds of things can happen to a card. But you cannot lose your hand. Very quickly, they're going to move to this being in the hand. And I tell you, as a Christian, you cannot take this. No matter what anybody says, God's word says you cannot take it. No matter what they try to talk you into, God's word says don't take it. In Revelation 14, verse 9, and the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast in his image and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, The same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast in his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. It's very simple. God's word says do not take it. Today there have been over 15,000 babies that have been given the positive identification, the microchip. Many companies are using the microchip as identification in their top-level employees. The Immigration Naturalization Service has a better passport, the human hand. So many of these things are all around us. We talk about the signs of the New World Order. God has spelled out in His Word just exactly what's going on today in the New World Order. Satan desires to have a one-world government. From the time he fell, he said, I want a one-world government. He wants to replace God. And so we see a government put together by men, a one-world government. The signs of the times are all around us. Last night, I talked about my involvement in the development of a little microchip implant. And many people have already taken that microchip implant. The news media has talked about it being a good thing. And they will tell you that it's a good thing to have this. Your children won't ever get lost again. They won't be able to give you the wrong medication. They won't be able to, you won't be able to lose this thing. And so the plan is underway that you will receive it. I would be remiss if I came to you and didn't tell you that God's word says, don't you take it. No matter how nice they make it sound. I've been in 17 one-world meetings. I was in Luxembourg with Henry Kissinger, George Shultz, and Bob Gates in a meeting. It was discussed there about the microchip. I was asked many questions, and I answered those questions. I've also asked God to forgive me for being in those meetings. They said, we'll make them aware of lost children. And so, after that meeting, on paper bags and milk cartons all over the United States, there were pictures of lost children. And then one day, all of those pictures disappeared. They aren't on the paper bags and milk cartons anymore because you had been conditioned. And now when you look at a paper bag or a milk carton, you think about lost children. We think like we are told to think. That's the reason why you have to have your mind renewed in Jesus Christ. This has to be in here. He has to give you the new mind. He said, take heed that no man deceive you. That's the reason why he said it. Today's technology is the key to the long-standing mysteries of Bible prophecy concerning the last days. It reaches out to us. This technology that we have today is addressed to this generation. What it's telling us is that the time is short. I want to show you the microchip. This is called a Destron IDI chip. This is about the size of a grain of rice. It has a little receiving antenna and a transmitting antenna. It has a microchip in the glass envelope. So this gives you a little look. We'll look at some more a little bit later. One of the things that we see, fiber optics. You see the orange bundles being put all around under the ground in most of the areas that we live in. The fiber optics allow fast transmissions of from our phone lines, but also it will open up our homes to the two-way communication for video communication, being able to see one another when we speak. Every time that you talk on the telephone, they are monitoring your phone conversation. Microchips are used to keep track of animals on military bases. Microchips also they talk about why carry cards when an implant will do the trick. This was in Computing Magazine. And so the advantages to a microchip in the hand are very good for the world. So we see there is a conditioning, a telling people that it is proper to have something on your hand. This was in one of the magazines, revealed a secret plan to tag every man, woman, and child. I'm not happy over what is happening, but I praise God that I can tell you and the next group and the next group, because time is running out. People ask me if 666 is in the microchip. When it was my responsibility to design this microchip, I had been working on a computer that was 18 bits. The word was 18 bits in length. When I designed this, I used much of the same Boolean equations. And so this microchip came out to be an 18-bit chip. There are 3 6-bit bytes. This whole microchip is 666. As I told you before, I was not a Christian. I could have cared less. This happened simply because that was what we were designing. I believe God knew when John was on the island of Patmos that it would be. He knew that it would be 18 bits. I knew that research had not been done on the effects of lithium in the body. So I called a doctor at the Boston Medical Center who had been on the project. I said, what would happen if the microchip gets shattered or broken and the lithium is in the body? He said, you would get a sore. He said, you would get a sore like a boil. I said, what kind of sore like a boil? And I was writing all the time. He said, you'd get a grievous sore. It would not heal. I was looking at Revelation 16:2 a short time after that. And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. This is a single sore. Will God cause the microchip to be shattered in all those people that receive it? I don't know. I just think it's very unusual that there would be a sore that would be one sore, not many sores. God has very carefully told us in his word not to take a mark in the forehead or in the hand. It was very easy to get babies to put this microchip in. All they did was run an ad in the paper, and they said $25 will be paid for every child birth through 1 year old that you bring for a government experiment. Women lined up in the rain with their babies to get the microchip. I met with a man from the CIA in Manassas, Virginia, and he warned me about some of the things that I was saying. But he also told me, you can't stop this thing. And I told him, I'm not trying to stop it, I'm trying to warn God's people. And so our reason for being here is not to cause you to form a group to go against the government. Our reason for being here is to inform you so you will be stronger in Jesus Christ. I believe if God's people will pray, that the best of the design that we have done can fall apart. And we can have one more day, one more week, one more month to tell people about Jesus Christ. Why would they want a microchip implant? Because the Bible says that no man might buy or sell, save he that have the mark.
So anyway, it was invented a while back, but I think that technology is going to be used because it goes into the skin. It's a lot of uh, markers that it meets when we talk about the mark of the beast. And so if you couple that with programmable money, so you can take money and make it digital, program it, and then put that into a person's body to where all they got to do now is scan their hand or scan their forehead to identify themselves, and that's attached to their money, it's attached to their medical records, it's attached to so many different things. Then I can see how they will have total control over the masses. And then if you don't receive the mark of the beast, then you cannot buy or sell. So what are you going to do? You got to go live off the land as best you can somehow, right? And this
But
is
see,
what it's coming down to.
I think the other aspect of it, like you said, the mark like in your hand,
Hmm.
and the programmable money. Well, the other part of it is the digital ID part of it, you know. And I think the digital ID is coming before the actual mark in the
100%
physical
correct. I'm
mark,
glad you went
you
there.
know.
But yep, you're 100% correct.
Because if you look at it now, I know the UK just passed a thing where they just said it's going to be mandatory digital ID for all UK citizens.
The idea had been by central banks to introduce this, as we said, central bank digital currency. But have you ever seen an article or a video or whatever description of what it actually looks like? I mean, with central bank paper money, we know what it looks like, right?
Yeah.
Bank digital currency, we know, and we've used it ourselves. We know what it looks like. But what does central bank digital currency look like? You see, so they never talk about that because people won't actually like the looks of it.
Yeah.
Because it apparently looks, and several central banks apparently, as I heard from my sources, have already fully developed the final stage of CBDC. I mean, it comes in stages, initially likely through your mobile phone, but that's only an intermediate step.
Mm.
And the final stage is, it's small, and it's the size of a grain of rice. Now, why is that?
And that grain of rice is your entire wallet, or?
Yes, it's your digital ID, your wallet, can be your passport, your key. Now, of course, what we found with our debit cards or credit cards is they've already now moved to the system, RFID chips, RFID technology where you just wave the thing, contactless.
Yes.
That is sort of the conditioning us in this direction, that in the future you'll just wave your hand because you've got the microchip implant under your skin. And because, and each step, there's a rational reason, it's easier just to wave this, isn't it? It's much faster because we always have to wait in the queues as everyone types in their numbers and all that. So just wave it, it's quicker. But the next rationalization would be, but you can lose your card, somebody can steal your card, and then you're just waving. That's kind of risky. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you couldn't lose it and nobody could steal it? But it's clear that that's it is almost a step too far for a lot of people because it is a violation of human dignity to actually inject something like that under the skin. So that's where you need some more persuasion.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that this concept of universal basic income has been around for around a century, where everyone should get some kind of citizens, payment. But the billionaire elites have so far not liked that. But since 2015, they've all come out. I mean, all the big billionaires and World Economic Forum have come out, this is a good idea, universal basic income. Well, why suddenly now? Because now we have the technology for the microchip implant. And so in 2017, Bill Gates came out and said that universal basic income is a good idea, but it's too early to introduce it. Now, what was still missing? So we had the technology for the microchip implant, but what was missing was the digital ID hadn't been introduced. Now, this is where this whole COVID agenda had become very useful.
And then a kind of very subtle and very sneaky way that they're doing it. If right now it's like different states in the U.S., but it's a lot of countries that are doing it too. But it's the new social media age verification.
Yeah.
And they say, well, it's for the kids because kids need to be on there. But again, hey, how are you gonna verify that I'm not a child unless I gotta bring forth my who I am, my identity, and all of this, and it has to be a digital form of it in order for me to use social media. And that's a very subtle way to begin with it. Another thing, Apple just rolled out digital IDs on your iPhone device. To where I think like you can add like your passport or something to the phone, like you do like when you scan like your debit cards, you do like tap on your debit cards, or when you load like boarding passes on there, you can also load like your digital ID is like a US passport on your iPhone.
Yeah.
So that is to me, that's the next phase that's here right now. Because
Yes.
you have digital ID, then they could tie your programmable money to your digital ID. And
Right.
then it's like the final phase is what's going to physically go in your body.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. And that's exactly what's happening. The digital, because I remember when with in America it was True ID, I think it's what they called it, and it was
Real ID.
Real ID, and it was
Yep.
voluntary.
Yep. And
When it,
it's mandatory
it's
now. It went
mandatory
live.
now. It's
Yep.
mandatory now, and that's how it always happens. Right? It starts off voluntary. It starts off, hey, you should do this. Look at the benefits of this. Look at the benefits of that. Now you ain't got to worry about nobody stealing your identity. Now you don't have to worry about this. Now you don't have to worry about that. And then most people don't care about it. As long as it don't impact their bottom line, I ain't doing all that extra stuff. And then one day you go get your license. They say, well, now you can't get a regular license. Now we only do True ID. What's it called? True
Yeah.
ID.
Real ID.
Real ID. We don't do Real ID. And then now and it's so subtle you don't even think about it. Like, okay, or whatever. What I gotta do? I gotta do anything different? No, it's just we're gonna do things different. You ain't gotta do nothing but stand there, take your picture, fill out
Yeah,
this form.
I knew it was weird because when Tennessee kind of integrated, you could go on to like the DMV site, and it was like Tennessee DMV Department of Homeland Security. It was like all integrated into one site, and it
Yeah,
was letting you know that like Department of Homeland Security was part of the Tennessee DMV. They were one and the same basically. And that's when you knew like, oh, they fully implemented Real ID. So if you got a Tennessee driver's license, by default you got Real ID.
yeah. And so when you talk about digital ID, that's where I was kind of, I guess, jumping the gun with China, because China with their social credit system, they've already done digital ID,
Oh
and
yeah.
I mean, it's full. They've been doing it for years now, and they got a
Hmm.
real social credit system. And America, Europe, the European countries, they already have all these things in place. With what Europe, they have what's called BCC or something like that. Those cameras,
I'm
they
not
got the cameras
familiar.
everywhere.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
What is it called, man? Well, they got cameras on every corner, everywhere. Like you can't do BCC, I think it's called something like that. But they've been tracking their citizens for a long time, and it's like that in America, they just don't tell people. But that's why crime. That's why it's so hard to get away with crime now, because and then they're using those ringtones, the door cameras. What's it called?
Doorbell cameras.
Yeah, they a lot of them have contracts with your local police departments to allow them to use those in investigations. So this
They
camera,
just
almost all any digital camera that's set up anywhere, they can have access to it.
That just came out. Well, it didn't just come out, but it became known to a lot of people who wasn't already familiar that the Ring doorbell cameras, they used to have they basically had been in a partnership with Amazon, I
Yeah.
believe, and it was Ring or Blink. It's one of them. But on the Super Bowl, there was an advertisement, and on the ad, they was basically talking about, oh, well, hey, they had like somebody who lost their dog, and I was like, well, no worries. We can put out an alert and help look for your dog all across the neighborhood, and we can basically utilize all of the different doorbell cameras that we have in order to
Hmm.
find your dog. And they put it out like it was just okay. But then the next day, it was big backlash, and next thing you know, the stock prices dropped, and Amazon dropped them as a contract. You know, but again, it was
They showing you the
okay.
capabilities.
Exactly, until people realized it and it was backlash, then it was like, oh no, no, that's all right. We're gonna cut ties. But yeah, all of the cameras, man, like you said, they have access to them.
Yeah. So yeah. So anything digital, somebody owns it, and if you don't own it, you gotta think who does. So cell phones, all these things. So I mean, all this the cell phones, these door cams, all these things in the cars, all these even the backup cameras and stuff. If it's connected to the cloud, anything that's connected to the cloud, they can access it.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
And so yeah, this is and it's the same thing with the CBDC. Once they connect your money and your identity to the cloud, then they control it. And they can control what you can access, what you can't access. And once they do that, once they have that full control, then they can implement the mark of the beast.
So, so let me ask you this then.
Yeah.
Knowing all of this, what advice do you give to people? How can they? What solutions? What can they do?